All right, we're going to go ahead and call this, what are we? The 15th of November's Joint Transportation Highways Military Affairs Committee meeting to order. And we'll start off quickly with roll call. So if I can get roll call called, please.
Senator Brennan. Senator Furphy. Here. Senator Kolb.
Present.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Representative Berger.
Here.
Representative Nymek.
Here.
Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Obermueller.
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Smith.
Here.
Representative Stivar.
Present.
Representative Wiley.
Here.
Co-Chairman Boner. Chairman Brown.
Here.
All are present, Mr. Chairman.
All right, committee, I'm going to take just a few quick seconds here, personal privilege, and just say this will be my last committee meeting for this particular committee where I will be the chairman. I just want to say thank you first and foremost to everybody on this committee. It has been an absolute pleasure serving with you guys. You guys have made it fun. It has been a rock star past 2 years. It's flown by. But I appreciate every single one of you. I'd also like to say thank you to, YDOT's not here yet, but we've got our military personnel, and I have sat here for 8 years and gotten to know just about everybody in this audience very, very well over the past 8 years. So I want to say thank you to you guys as well. Thank you for all the hard work that you guys do for our men and women in uniform and the good policies that you guys have brought forward to us. Watched a lot of people get promoted from XO to moving on up the range, so it's kind of fun watching that as well. And actually, I can remember General Porter being just the 1-star at the time, so it's been kind of nice. But with that, appreciate you guys all. And Mr. Chairman, any opening comments?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to reiterate your comments, Chairman Brown. I also recognize we have a few legislators here who this will be at least their last transportation meeting. And so I want to recognize Senator Furphy, Representatives Obermueller, Representative Nymek, Representative Berger, and did I miss anybody? Representative O'Hearn. So thank you so much for your service to the legislature. We did get some pastries over in that room right over there in your honor. So thank you for, if you get first dibs, hopefully there's not for everybody, but yeah, feel free to help yourself. And just, small little token of our gratitude. Obviously, it doesn't do much to recognize all the effort that goes into this sort of work, but I just want to thank all of you for your service to the state of Wyoming and appreciate it. It's been an honor to work with you the past 2 years on this committee. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, as we move into the actual orders of business, beyond the opening remarks, we have the approval of minutes from September 12th and 13th. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Moved by Pappas and seconded by O'Hearn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Those meeting minutes have been approved. And we are flying through here. So we are on to our number 2 item, which is our sexual assault update. General Porter, Mr. Smith, floor is yours. Please introduce yourself for the record, and everything is up to you guys at this point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Major General Greg Porter, and I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. Chris, you want to?
I'm Chris Smith, the Human Resources Officer for the Wyoming Military Department.
Hey, good morning, committee. I thought I would just start very quickly. If you look at the first slide, it's on slide 3, where it's entitled Dangerous World. I kind of wanted to set the stage about, what's going on out there. You probably more than anybody understands what's the volatility going on in the world out there right now. I would say, given my personal assessment, that of the 5 domains of warfare, and you've heard me talk about them, air, land, space, sea, and space, we are currently already at war in 2 of those. At the unclassified level, things are happening at the in the space and cyber warfare every day that threaten infrastructure and the people of the United States. Our job, I think, as the military, and particularly the Wyoming National Guard, is to prepare ourselves, though, for when conflict and competition moves into the land and air and space domains. And that's what our focus is. And if you can see across the world right now, China continues to to be our pacing threat. They are building a military specifically designed to kill the American military. I want there to be unequivocal about that. That's what they're doing. Russia, you've seen Russia and Ukraine, what's going on there. They'll continue to be a threat. And then as you can see now, the adversaries are starting to coalesce. North Korea has sent troops to aid Russia. China now is building stronger relationships. So you can start to see the world polarize itself much like it did before World War II. I have heard some military leaders talk about we are now in that period minutes before Pearl Harbor. Now, I don't know if I subscribe to that level of assessment yet, but I will tell you we must be prepared for it. Currently, members of your Wyoming National Guard are currently serving in the Middle East. We have the 2nd Battalion, 300th Field Artillery Regiment over there now with 16 launchers, a little over 350 personnel. Right after Thanksgiving, we'll deploy the 115th Field Artillery Brigade with the Signal Company to Central Command as well. And we'll also send one of our Det-6 aviation companies to Southern Command about 2 days after Thanksgiving to get that done. So the Wyoming Military Department continues to provide forces to the global fight. I say all that to put in context. Many of you may have heard that culture eats strategy. Culture eats a lot of things. If we don't have our culture correct, if we don't have our culture right, if we aren't able to get after the fight, then the rest of this doesn't matter. And I'll tell you that given the choice between great strategy and a great culture, almost always leaders will lean towards great culture. And that's what we strive for here, because I tell you, the next fight's going to be a different fight than what our forces experienced the last 23 years. As you can see with Ukraine right now, the battlefield is significantly transparent, and it's lethal, and it's volatile, and it's bloody. There's not many places to hide on the battlefield anymore. If they can find you, they will hurt you. And so our force has to start having that mental shift to be able to survive those kinds of contexts. Losing an aircraft, losing an artillery battery, but continuing to drive on to execute the fight. Culture is the key to that. If we don't have strong culture where we trust one another, where we have common vision, we won't be successful. That brings my focus of our culture here and why this sexual assault and harassment update is so important. If we could, let's go to the executive summary. One more. If I condense what was happened this last year, I'll tell you that the Wyoming National Guard doesn't have a culture where we tolerate sexual assault and sexual harassment. Everything that I can see across that from our incidents of sexual harassment, which are very small. We had one where somebody was in somebody's personal space and made them uncomfortable, and we had one where an individual put their hand on the knee during a counseling session, didn't think that was appropriate. But if you look across what we have a lot of confidence in our leaders to see, hold accountable, and correct actions on the line. And that was probably the biggest thing we saw out of our DEOC survey, is that overwhelming confidence in leaders. There are some commonalities, though, that we look at across there that we try to train our force on, and that's victims tend to know their perpetrator. It tends to be somebody that they know. Perpetrators are male, but the victims both become male and female. Alcohol, which has been a factor in a lot of cases previous to this that we've observed across the country, really only happened in 2 of our instances. And ranks are relatively the same. So I'm not seeing anybody that's using a quid pro quo or anything along those lines. This last year, we decreased sexual assaults from 11 to 9. And then of those, 6 of those were actually, we know they're unrestricted. One of those cases actually was for 2, it counts as 2. We had 1 perpetrator, but 2 cases. It was an individual who so far has not been to a basic training yet, a young person, and law enforcement's still investigating that. But that was the only incident we had this year. The rest of the incidents reported were from previous years. I try not to take too much try not to make too many decisions from that because it's a small sample size, but I'm encouraged that our force is reporting from previous years. That's good. I want to continue to do that, encourage folks to continue to report, but like I said, I don't know that there's a big enough thing for me to draw too many conclusions, and I hesitate to say we're winning in that particular space or not. If I continue on, we do the climate survey, which you've heard is the DEOX. Really, what we found from that is a real high confidence in leaders, particularly at the unit level. Over 85% of the respondents said, hey, we believe in our leadership. When I look at our IG sensing sessions that go across, that's the IG, the Inspector General, is an independent person. We have them go meet with our soldiers and airmen across the force, and they're free to share any issues they have. Didn't really have any issues that came up concerning sexual harassment, sexual assault. It was more communication. It was more stress. Those kind of things that come through that became evident. And so we continue to get after those. As I committed to the governor and you and the force, we did have some external assistant visits to come take a look at us. Had 3 separate visits from outside the agency, National Guard Bureau, come in and take a look at our program. We were found to be in compliance across all 3 of those, but we did learn a lot. There's quite a few things that we can do better administratively, and I'll talk about some sustains and improves here in a moment. But we'll continue to bring other people in to make sure that we're doing the very best that we can to make sure that we're complying and with all regulations and laws. Some things that we do really well that we found out across the department. There's no wrong door in the Wyoming Military Department for report. You go to anybody, we'll get you to the right place. So if there's some reason that you need to report, we want you to do that, and we want you to do it without fear of any sort of reprisal. Force is continuing to do reporting, particularly from previous years, and we think that's important. We want to help any victims that may require it. So we encourage and support anybody that wants to report, even from previous years. Our force is pretty well trained. We do more than I think just about any organization you can think of. Once again, getting after that culture thing, because if we don't have a culture of trust where they can trust our leadership to do the right things, and they can trust their fellow brothers and sisters to do the right things, then we're not being successful. We're not doing what we're supposed to do there. When the perpetrator is a Wyoming National Guard individual, we do hold them accountable. And so I'm oftentimes a little frustrated at the process. You know, as I've told you before, we do not investigate sexual assaults in the National Guard. We leave that up to local law enforcement. Sometimes it takes a little longer for local law enforcement to make a determination than it comes to us. And then we have the ability to then potentially go to Office of Complex Investigations. Sometimes that takes a little longer than I would like to do it, but I do appreciate the fact that we don't investigate them, and I think that gives some level of confidence in our force that they'll get to the right ending. As I said, we want to continue to get an outside set of eyes. We can always look to improve. There's always something better we can do. And particularly in this culture discussion about trying to be the very most cohesive team we can be, any outside set of eyes is good for us. And lastly, we want to take the data that we get and drive it down to unit commanders. They often know what they don't know what they don't know. And so part of our prevention workforce is to provide data to them about what's going on in their force. How can they get better? What's troubling soldiers and airmen? And so we're going to continue to refine that and get that down. We would not have been able to do that without the prevention workforce that we have on board right now. So those are the things I would say that will continue to get better. As always, or that we'll continue to do, there's always places where we can get better. One of the things that we found, though, is we can do more to link resources outside of the Wyoming National Guard to our victims. Our communities have some great set of resources out there, and often we don't consider them as we support our victims. Our goal is to be world-class in support. And so I think we're going to broaden that aperture a little bit. So if there is any capabilities that we don't have, then we'll make sure that they get to them. There's a couple of things. Our climate survey indicated that some members still see instances of some vulgarity, inappropriate jokes and that sort of thing. So that's out there in the force, but We're not seeing reports of that. That's not coming to us in any of the way that we have. So most likely, I suspect its leaders handle it right there and it's done. But I do want to dig into it a little bit more, make sure that there's not a thought out there that they can't report or shouldn't report. But there is a little bit of a disconnect, I think, in the data there, and we'll continue to get after that. The last thing I think we'll continue to improve on, there's a lot of change in this space right now. As Congress develops more laws, as that in turn requires more regulation in the Department of Defense, in turn causes more policy changes in the National Guard. We have to keep on top of that and stay with it. And so we'll continue to improve in that area as we get going forward. Let me pause and just answer any questions on the executive summary. And I know I don't want to take much more time.
Committee, any questions directly for General Porter on the executive summary? Seeing nothing. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just maybe a little bit of an update on how it's working with Workforce Services. I know that's a change the legislature made, and just a little bit of feedback there would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, we think it's going really well. So far, we've had 8 inquiries at Workforce Services that a counselor actually was appointed and met with the member and did the informal phase. They've had more than that contact, but a lot of times they will put them in the right lane. What I find a positive, if we have some people contacting Workforce Services, giving them a fact situation they're dealing with, and oftentimes it's not in the right lane, it's not discrimination, and they'll refer them back to the appropriate agency. Of those 8 counselor reports that we've had, we've had 2 go formal. They're both currently pending. They're they're acting now. One of them, when you go to the formal stage, you do a full investigation, develop all the facts. They're both in that stage now. The first one, the investigator is supposed to be done sometime in the next 2 weeks. The other one's just starting. So we think it's working well. We've talked to Workforce Services. They're happy with what's going on. So we think I really appreciate the legislature doing that. We were trying to address, in case people are afraid to come to the Wyoming Military Department, to give them that outside avenue, and people are using it. So I think that's a major positive.
Just real quick, do you have any indication from Workforce Services, of course, deals with this with all state agencies, whether the Wyoming Military Department, per capita has more or less cases? Any indication is how you're looking compared to other agencies within the state government?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, we haven't seen all the other agencies, any data. From talking to Workforce Services and ANI, we definitely get more inquiries, but I think part of that is because we tell people, go here. I'm not sure every state agency does that, but I don't want to speak for other state agencies.
Okay. Committee, anything further? All right. General, back to you, sir.
All right, sir. Let me just cover what we're looking at for command actions in 25 very quickly, and it's in your slide. I imagine you've already, obviously we'll continue to provide our report to the governor and this committee. Right after that, what we will do is we meet as a group to go over all of the inputs that we have, RDX surveys, IGs, this report, and find out, hey, what do we need to do different? Do I need to adjust policy? Do I need to adjust training? And so we'll go through that process once again for the next year. We're going to be a little more focused on the command teams as they come in to take command. Both the senior enlisted leader and the commander will provide that briefing to them within 30 days to make sure that happens and really get after specifically those threats that are happening in the Wyoming National Guard, which, alcohol has been one of them. If you recall, we had for a period of time an issue when our folks left the state and didn't have their soldiers or wingmen or battle buddies with them. We had to do some training to adjust that. So we'll continue to focus that at the command level. There's starting to be more, sexual harassment is starting to be we're starting to have capability now to investigate those in greater detail in the National Guard on the harassment side. But you have to have a special set of training in order to do that. So we did our first training last year but they've come out now with some new requirements for that. So we'll do it yet again and trade a pool of investigators. The whole purpose of that is if something were to happen on the air side, we want to bring somebody from the Army side over so that we get an unbiased look at it, or vice versa. Equal opportunity policies, we just got to continue to update those. A couple of them were out of date and had some old information, so we got to get those back squared away. But that's I think it's already done, as a matter of fact. Send a one-page talking paper out to the commanders that talks about, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what's going on. This is what's good. This is what's bad. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to hold folks accountable. It's important for our force to know that we don't tolerate it, and that we take administrative action when folks violate our standards. As I said before, that IPPW, our prevention team, really focused on preventing this from happening. And we think the best way to get after that is to provide those unit commanders the data, what their unit risk inventory says, what their soldiers are saying about it, what the culture is, and let them continue to be able to find solutions. So we'll even put more resources to making sure that happens. And then we're going to continue to support every victim that we have, with what I consider would be world-class support if and when that happens. We've got, over 3,000 folks spread across 20 states. I think it's inevitable that some of our members are going to come into contact with an assault. And so we want to make sure that we're able to assist them and help them and provide services for them when it happens, because it's never a good outcome if our victims aren't supported. Really, that's probably what I'll conclude on the command actions. I can answer any questions about that or anything in the report if you like. If not, I'll stand for your review.
Committee, just make sure that everybody's also aware, this is statutorily required that we get this information from the military department. So this is your chance to, if you have some questions, you have some discussion that you'd like to specifically talk about, certainly now is the time. So do you guys have any questions for the general or Mr. Smith? Seeing none. Gentlemen, thank you for the update. We'll go ahead and push you guys back to your seats for a few seconds, and we'll open this up for public comment. Is there any public comment? Please come on down. Make sure the green light is on at the microphone, and introduce yourself for the record. And the floor is yours.
Good morning. My name is Marilyn Burden, and I'm a former member of the Wyoming Military Department. And I've had some people, like 3 people have contacted me in the last year. And so I would like to share those concerns. So my first request this morning is I would like to do an update, and in addition to the legislation passed in 2022, because there are more concerns going on in the Wyoming Military Department that impact the culture than sexual harassment, sexual assault, and discrimination. And the way the bill is written, it's not written as it needs to be. So for more accurate transparency and accountability for the governor and this committee, I believe that the general should be briefing all complaint areas which negatively impact retention and recruiting, especially given that the general continuously requests taxpayer money to support recruiting efforts. So I would like to add sensing sessions, lawsuits against the agency, suicide attempts and completions, cases of power and abuse, including harassment, non-sexual, and cases of fraud, waste, and abuse, just to name a few, and those fall under IG and congressional complaints. The second request is that what I would like to have added to law, that I got the idea from an Army field grade officer about 6 years ago, is that the adjutant general position be limited to 2 terms, like all other command positions in the Department of Defense. As it stands, when the current adjutant general finishes his 2nd term, the position will have been held by 3 Army generals over the course of 24 years. One person sitting in the top position for 8 years lends itself to stagnation, limits in career growth, and promotion opportunity for other officers, and possible abuses of power and authority. A few things that have been brought to me. There is one unit in the Air Guard that has had or is currently ongoing. 5 active complaints going on at the same time. These complaints are filed by both men and women against the same 2 or 3 senior NCOs. My source was not able to discuss the details of an ongoing investigation, but was able to tell me there was 1 equal opportunity complaint, 3 inspector general complaints, and a sexual assault that's under investigation. Most disturbing to me is that these are the same individuals that were listed in a 2018 IG complaint, where the complainant was threatened with an involuntary extension of her enlistment, bullied, harassed, her medical records were illegally accessed, and she was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement so they would let her out on her instead of extending her enlistment. And due to consequences in 2018, she dropped her complaint and literally moved across country and no longer communicates with anyone here. The perpetrators of bad behavior moved down the continuum of harm to a sexual assault investigation. So from sexual harassment to sexual assault. So because things weren't addressed 6 years ago, there's problems now. While I don't know the details of the complaints or the investigation reports, the perception of the troops is that leadership has delivered absolutely no visible consequences. And my source says that the unit is set to lose 8 good troops in the next 6 to 12 months in order to keep 2 or 3 toxic ones with over 20 years of service when they could just retire and go away. In August, I was contacted by a former junior enlisted soldier. During her time in the Wyoming Military Department, she says she was raped multiple times by the same sergeant. And she has filed a complaint with her senator because she lives in another state now, so that should be flowing its way in the next year. And her Wyoming Guard personnel and medical records are non-existent. And she's contacted Guard Bureau and the state of Wyoming and all sorts of places, and they're nowhere to be found. And because of this, she's not able to get care at the VA or receive disability or any of that to get the medical and mental health care that she needs. And her trauma has manifested itself into physical ailments. And missing records is a violation of 18 U.S. Code 2071, and penalties of this for willfully and unlawfully destroying, damaging, or altering records. The maximum penalty is a $2,000 fine, 3 years in prison, or both, loss of office, and disqualification from holding any U.S. office. Literally, all she wants is her records. And then also, there is a pending lawsuit against the agency, so that'll be interesting to watch over the course of the next year. And Mr. Chairman, my concern is that if I'm aware of 3 situations, how many more are there? As I was reviewing General Porter's brief, it's missing demographics, it's missing the number of Guard perpetrators of the 9 reported sexual assaults, and I didn't see any gender discrimination numbers, but that doesn't mean there aren't any, or maybe there weren't any. Of the General's fiscal year 25 command actions, most concerning to me on slide 11 is item F, where he says, "We will hold military perpetrators accountable for their actions by imposing appropriate administrative actions." Administrative actions. That's only part of the solution. What I'd like to remind everyone is that sexual assault, including rape, is a crime. What's missing from this list of actions are the words courts-martial. And the state legislature updated that, the State Uniform Code of Military Justice in 2021. So we know that that's available. And this item literally tells perpetrators the worst thing they will get is an Article 15 for committing a crime. And I will tell you, punishments in the Wyoming Military Department are worse if you get a DUI. At least if you do 2 of those, they drop kick you out. But hey, you know, you can sexually assault people more than once and you get to stay in. Here's the thing that has really frustrated me with leaders, colonels and generals for as long as I can remember, 10, 15, 20 years pertaining to these. One of the things that victims need in their healing process, yes, counseling and legal help and medical and all of those things, but one of the things that they need is justice. And the person responsible for that are people in command positions, but ultimately the adjutant general is responsible for justice. And these victims are not getting justice, and they fail to remove sexual predators from the ranks. And based upon my training, sexual predators, true sexual predators, have between 300 and 600 victims in a lifetime. So if somebody does something once, you got to figure out how to get rid of them. And there's all sorts of ways to do that in the military. So by failing to get rid of these, anybody who doesn't take action is then an accessory to the next crime committed by these perpetrators. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Committee, any questions? Anything? Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate you being here today. Any further public testimony related to sexual assault and sexual harassment for the military department? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Committee, with this being our last committee meeting, I will open this up for any directives for staff at this point and/or the military department if you guys wish to do anything. Keep in mind that anything that is requested at this point will not come back before this committee as a whole. So is there any committee directives? Anybody have any questions? Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, it was mentioned that about if there was a rape, the question is, if somebody that's involved with the guard, can they go to the police department or law enforcement and report such a rape if that's what the accusation is? It's a kind of, I don't know the answer, and I'd just like to hear what the answer is. Thank you.
General, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, that is exactly the route that needs to happen. Like I said, we are not allowed to investigate sexual assaults. It goes to local law enforcement first. So even if we're made aware of it first, we will refer it to local law enforcement. And so that's where it all starts.
Follow up?
Yeah, follow up. I meant, can the National Guard's person go to the police department just on their own, drive over there and say, hey, I've been raped and I'd like to report this? Because it's a serious accusation to say that someone somehow is precluded or it didn't get, I guess, documented is my point of view. But thank you.
General?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, same thing. Yes, sir. They are free to do that. And like I said, whether they come to us first or they go to law enforcement, we're going to get them back to law enforcement so they can take action.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you also explain if this happened on a deployment, how that would work?
General?
So that's
Yes, sir.
understood.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, so generally when they go on deployment, they'll go in Title 10 status. So that's when they become part of the active duty. So it's the military chain of command that will take over at that time, and military action. So it'll be investigated through now it's a little bit different on active duty now in terms of investigations. It has to be outside the chain of command, outside of the military. But then when it comes back in for consequences, then it can be court-martial, can be any of those things that comes on in a Title 10 status.
Ready? Anything further on this topic? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the public comment on this. Committee, again, this is something we certainly heard some, I think, probably some good ideas to potentially bring into some legislation over the course of the next year. If this committee or individuals choose to do that, certainly worthwhile to look into. That takes us into our next topic, and that is the reconsideration of Bill Draft 25 LSO 0080, the ROTC Endowment Program. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Mr. Co-Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll have LSO give us a more detailed summary of why we're reconsidering this, but there's a basic miscommunication between myself and staff. And so we'll update you on some information. And basically, just to give you an idea, what we're asking you to reconsider is that the new bill that you have here basically takes out any and all appropriation. It would just set up the fund, the endowment. And of course, we could always make a decision through the budget bill to provide public funds towards the endowment. But there's also the opportunity to raise private funds that would happen regardless of what happens in the budget. So I think that's the best way to go. I think that decision would be best suited in the budget. We can separate the policy decision as to whether this endowment's a good idea from a fiscal decision, which is going to be best suited in the budget bill. So that's why we're bringing this, or at least from my perspective, but there's also some more, I guess, technical things that perhaps also could go over and just provide a little bit of a summary of what we have here.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Talise, if you'll go ahead and go over the bill draft for us, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hansen, Staff Attorney LSO. So this is Bill Draft 25 LSO 80, version 0.8, ROTC Endowment Program. So this bill is on reconsideration at the direction of the co-chairman. At the committee's September meeting, they moved to have an appropriation be of $1 from the University of Wyoming's block grant. And historically, a change to an agency's budget in a bill that is not the budget bill requires us to bring the full text of the tables within the agency's section of the budget bill to decrease or increase the agency's budget. So here, this would have required bringing in the table for the University of Wyoming, section 67 of the budget bill, to decrease the state aid program by $1. And this could potentially create a conflict, having section 67 of the table in this bill, and then also section 67 of the budget bill that could be amended. If they're both amended differently, that could create conflicts and it could create some problems down the road. So at the chairman's direction, we just took out the appropriation at this time for your guys' reconsideration. And similar to what Co-Chairman Boner said, you guys can fund it in the budget, the supplemental budget, or some other avenue if you guys wish. But as it currently stands, it would just set up the ROTC endowment fund, and it would allow for private gifts and other things to fund the endowment at this time, but with no legislative appropriation unless you guys do something in the supplemental budget.
Committee, is there any direct questions for LSO staff at this point? And/or the co-chairman for the reconsideration of this bill from last meeting? Seeing none. Okay. We will bring forward the University of Wyoming's, we'll go ahead and bring forward Mr. Smith, and then we'll go ahead and bring forward the lieutenant colonels. If you guys want to go ahead and just join us up here in case there are any questions, it'll save a little bit of time. Mr. Smith, if you wouldn't mind, 2 days in a row, not two committee meetings I get to see at very often, so.
There's quite a bit of overlap from the JEC. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I'll just, I guess, stand on our testimony at the last meeting. This appears to be a technical change, kind of that the co-chair and staff has worked out. So I'll just stand for any questions and look forward to working with the new committee moving forward.
There we go. Committee, any questions for Mr. Smith in the university regarding the ROTC endowment? Okay, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Mr. Smith or either of the two colonels, so what does it look like currently? Do you do any fundraising for the ROTC department? I know you have a UW Foundation, which I'm assuming is involved, but if you just run us through what that looks like, is there anything different with the ROTC programs than any other part of the university?
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, I will defer to the colonels here on specifics. As you mentioned, the University of Wyoming Foundation, we just completed our Giving Day efforts to raise funds for various entities across campus. Those are voluntary. The entities themselves come to the foundation and say, yeah, we would like to participate in that. And I am not familiar with our OTC program, so I'm going to defer to these gentlemen on whether or not they participated this year and to the extent that they did. Thanks.
Colonel?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Hanson, Professor of Military Science for the Army, ROTC Department at the University of Wyoming. Specific to that last question, fundraising for me as an active duty military officer, I have restrictions that prevent me from doing that. What I do is generally advise, coach, and mentor the students for their endeavors to raise money for the cadet club that's part of the University of Wyoming. So I'm involved in more of just an advisory role than anything else. To that end, for Giving Day, the cadets in my program worked fairly hard for this first year that they decided that they wanted to get involved, and I think they raised themselves on the order of about $14,800 for Giving Day. So that'll go directly to the students and what they want to choose to use that money for, in addition to some other fundraising that they do throughout the year for the special teams that we host.
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, Lieutenant Colonel Brett Cove, I'm the Air Force ROTC Detachment Commander. We're in the same situation with restrictions from the active duty side on raising for Giving Day. We did have cadet participation. I don't have that specific number on hand. I'm happy to get back with you with that information. But we do also have the cadets participating in multiple extracurricular activities to raise money for their organization, but they mostly use that for small ticket items, uniforms, T-shirts, things along those lines.
Committee, any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, can
Mr.
I
Smith,
just
please.
add, first, I neglected to identify myself for the record, so I apologize. Mike Smith, University of Wyoming. Just to further just clarify Chairman Boner's question, the funds that do flow from the university to the programs come from the state aid line item. Thank you.
Okay. Committee, any questions for the university and/or ROTC/ROTC? Yes, Representative Berger, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess the only question I have is we're not letting the boot cross the border, are we?
Mr. Smith,
Mr.
I'm really
Chairman,
looking forward to
I believe
this
they meet at
here,
the
so-
border, and so it is in Colorado by now, I suppose, for tonight's game, and let's hope we bring it back. Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Follow-up
Co-Chairman.
question, who's taking the boot to them? The athletics will take it down there. I will have 2 of my cadets on the field to guard it and hopefully bring it back.
Excellent. Well, it's been sitting in good hands for the past, 3 years at least, so I think we're doing all right with that boot. But committee, any further questions related to the ROTC program bill? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you. We'll go ahead and open this up to public comment. Is there any public comment on the reconsideration of the ROTC endowment, 25 LSO 0080? Seeing nobody jumping up, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring that back to the dais. Committee, what is your pleasure on the reconsideration motion? Did I hear something? Okay, moved by Pappas, seconded by Nemec. Committee, let's go ahead and open this up for discussion. Senator Boner.
So just procedural here, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to vote as to whether we want to reconsider it. Right? Is that the correct procedure?
That's correct.
And then we
And
would
then-
vote to approve this new, or
That's
not
correct.
approve this new bill draft. And so,
My apologies. You're
and
correct.
so
Yep.
just make sure I'm got it correctly. So if we don't do anything, we're just going to continue sponsor the same bill that we did last meeting. We've already voted to sponsor it. This is just basically to make this adjustment to the bill.
Correct.
And so if we don't vote to reconsider it, or if we vote to reconsider it, then I guess vote against it, it's my understanding that we'll still have the bill from last.
If we
meeting,
vote
is
to
that correct?
reconsider, my understanding, we're getting the look of, I don't know from LSO. My understanding is that if we vote to reconsider, that is a reconsideration of the original motion.
Okay,
And so
gotcha.
if we vote to reconsider and that bill fails, then this bill then is no longer sponsored by the committee. That is kind of the consideration you have to think about when we're doing a reconsideration. So this motion, as so moved by Senator Pappas and seconded by Nemec, is a reconsideration to then vote on the bill itself with the technical corrections. So any questions or discussion on the reconsideration? Actually, this is a non-debatable discussion. So with that being said, all those in favor of the reconsideration motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no? That motion passes. So the bill is now back on the table for reconsideration as amended. Is there any discussion and/or motion for approval to carry this forward? I'll make a motion to reconsider the bill. Okay, so the motion is to move this bill forward by Senator Pappas. Is there a second? Seconded by O'Hearn. Committee, is there any discussion on this bill? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My vote will be a no. It is not a reflection in any way on what we're trying to accomplish here. I love the ROTC. What I don't love is coffee cans. I don't love endowments. I think that is the wrong way to fund it, and I will be a no.
Okay. Committee, anything further? Seeing none. Mr. Co-Chairman, any further? Okay. All right. I'm not sure who's calling. Eve, is it you? If I can have you, please call roll call for 0080 as amended.
This is a roll call vote for 25 LSO 0080 ROTC Endowment Program as amended. Senator Brennan?
Aye.
Senator Furphy?
Aye.
Senator Kolb?
No.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Representative Berger?
Aye.
Representative Nemec?
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn?
Aye.
Representative Obermueller?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
No.
Representative Smith?
No.
Representative Stivar?
No.
Representative Wiley?
No.
Co-Chairman Boner?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
Aye.
Nine aye, 5 no.
Okay. Committee, that is reconsideration. We will be responsoring that bill as amended. Appreciate you guys' time on that and appreciate Senator Boner catching those corrections as well as LSO working with Senator Boner, Chairman Boner on that to get that squared away. That moves us into item number 4. We're moving ahead just like we did the last committee meeting, folks, so I hope Department of Transportation is kind of paying attention because we might be getting ahead a little bit there. Luckily, this is a little bit closer drive for them this time around. That moves us on to topic number 4, post-secondary education military support. We're going to go ahead and start with Bill Draft 25 LSO 0083. And Ms. Hanson, floor is yours again.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, Staff Attorney LSO, presenting Bill Draft 25 LSO 83, version 0.7, Wyoming's investment in veterans' mental health. This bill draft was amended at the committee's September meeting and pushed to this final meeting for further consideration. I'll start by walking through the bill draft. Section 1 starts on page 1, line 10, by creating Wyoming Statute 2116-2001. Subsection A on page 2, lines 6 and 7 creates the Wyoming Veteran Loan Repayment Program, which is administered by the University of Wyoming. Subsection B on page 2, lines 9 through 21 outlines the eligibility requirements to qualify for a loan under this loan repayment program. The requirements are that the applicant must be a United States citizen or permanent resident, be a veteran, be enrolled in good standing in a social work program, a counseling program, or a psychology program at the University of Wyoming leading to a master's degree. Subsection C on page 3, lines 1 through 9, provides that subject to the availability of funds appropriated for this program, loans may be granted to qualified applicants to pay the cost of attendance for the academic programs listed in subsection B. This subsection also provides a definition of the cost of attendance. Subsection D on page 3, lines 11 through 19, provides that any federal, state, or other grants or funding other than loans received by the applicant for the cost of attendance shall be prioritized by the University of Wyoming and applied before a loan under this section. Subsection D further provides that any loan shall not exceed the cost of attendance for a qualifying master's program reduced by the amount of any federal, state, or other grants or funding received by the applicant. Subsection E on page 3, lines 21 through 23, and page 4, lines 1 through 6, provides that a recipient of a loan may repay the loan without monetary payment by working at least blank % of his working hours providing mental health services within the state to veterans. Subsection E further provides that to qualify for the loan repayment under this program, the work must be performed within the minimum amount of time necessary to repay the loan plus blank years, which begins with the calendar month following the month in which the student completed the academic program. The staff comment on page 4 to page 6 provides other examples of work requirements for other loan repayment programs. These loan repayment programs include the Wyoming Teacher Shortage Loan Repayment Program, the Wyoming Investment in Nursing Loan and Grant Program, WWAMI, WICHE, WYDENT, and the Title IV-E stipend program that was a DFS program from 2004 to 2010. Subsection F, paragraph 1 on page 6, lines 36 through 40, and page 7, lines 1 and 2 provide that any recipient of a loan who fails to complete the academic program for which the loan was provided shall commence monetary repayment for the loan not later than 45 days after the recipient leaves the academic program. Subsection F, paragraph 2, on page 7, lines 4 through 9, provides that any recipient of a loan who fails to obtain employment that provides mental health services within the state to veterans within 240 days after completing the program shall commence monetary repayment of the loan within 285 days after completion of the program. Subsection G on page 7, lines 11 through 15, provide that the loan repayment options may be deferred for up to 5 years while a recipient is serving on full-time active duty in the armed forces, the Army National Guard, or the Air National Guard. Subsection H on page 7, lines 17 through 22, and page 8, lines 1 through 13, grants the University of Wyoming the powers to implement this program and establish terms and conditions of the loans, including the interest rates and loan terms, the application process, criteria for loan repayment, and the criteria for determining the cost of attendance. Subsection J on page 8, lines 15 and 16 provides that funding of the loan repayment program shall be by appropriation of the legislature. Subsection K on page 8, lines 18 and 19 provides that the repayment of loans and interest thereon shall be credited to the school foundation program account. Subsection M on page 8, lines 21 through 23, and page 9, lines 1 through 4, requires the University of Wyoming to annually review the loan program and report to the governor and the legislature. Subsection N on page 9, lines 6 and 7, provides a sunset date of June 30th, 2035. Subsection O on page 9, lines 9 through 13, provides a definition of veteran to mean any person who served in the United States Armed Forces, the Army National Guard or Air National Guard, and who is discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. Section 2 begins on page 9, line 15. Subsection A on page 9, lines 17 through 23, and page 10, lines 1 through 5, provides a blank appropriation amount from the blank account to the University of Wyoming for the period beginning July 1, 2025, and ending June 30th, 2026. Subsection B on page 10, lines 7 through 12 provides that not more than blank % of the amount appropriated shall be used by the University of Wyoming for administrative costs. The staff comment on the bottom of page 10 provides that the committee will need to determine the appropriation amount, how to fund the appropriation, and how to fund the appropriation. Section 3 on page 10, lines 27 and 28, and page 11, lines 1 and 2 provides an immediate effective date. I'll stand for any questions.
How long did it take you to write all that out? No, I'm just kidding. Committee, any questions for Ms. Hanson on the discussion of the bill? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Hanson, for that very, very detailed introduction to the bill again, or reintroduction. We'll go ahead and open this up to the Military Department and our Veterans Commission. Who is taking the lead on this one?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Smith, floor is yours.
Thank you. So as the committee will recall, and it's in the slides, we were trying to address mental health for veterans within the state. We modeled this bill after the WWAMI program in similar ones where we're trying to get people to, in these certain degree fields, to stay in Wyoming and serve veterans. We do have several small amendments to suggest in the bill with some further research. I will tell this committee that when it comes to Section 2 of the appropriation, the percentage or amount of administrative costs, I'll defer to Vice President Smith from UW. Hard to figure out a number. I think he has some numbers about the cost of some of these programs, $26,000 a year to $40,000 for non-residents-ish. It just depends on how many people this committee wants to try to attract to this process. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest some amendments, if I may. On page 2, beginning on line 19, where on line 17, excuse me, it says be a veteran, so the only people currently into the bill draft that would be able to get a loan would be a veteran. We had some discussion of this in the last 2 sessions. We'd like to suggest striking that, because if someone who had a parent, a brother, or someone else who was a veteran and they want to help, we want to gather them, and if they're willing to help veterans. So rather than it just be exclusive to people who are veterans, we'd like it to also attract people who want to work with veterans. So that's one suggestion, would be to strike line 17, subnumeral 2, be a veteran. The second proposed amendment would be line 20 and 21, again on page 2 in subparagraph 3. It says a master's degree in social work, counseling, or psychology. Further research has indicated that it should state master's degree in social work or counseling, or a PhD in psychology. The reason for that is, to be a clinical psychologist licensed in Wyoming, you have to have a PhD. So we took bachelor degree programs out of this last hearing, but in order to promote clinical psychology, it really needs to say PhD. With that, there are several places where we talk about master's degrees that we would have to have a conforming amendment if this committee chooses to add in a PhD in psychology on line 21. And I have those, and I can certainly share them with LSO if the committee does make that change. The next suggested amendment is down at the bottom on line 23 of page 3, where we talk about a recipient of the loan has to work with veterans not less than X working hours. We were going to suggest 25%. We're a little concerned that in some of the outlying rural areas, people pursuing a counseling, it's going to be very hard to attract veterans, and we don't want to make this too onerous. We're certainly open to the committee's suggestion to whatever percentage. We just suggest 25%. The next amendment would be on page 4, line 4. It talks about the repayment of loan plus X years. In conformity to the WWAMI program, we would suggest 3 years for that purpose. Down on line 6 on page 4 is again where it says master's degree, but again, if that changes to include PhDs, it would have to be changed. That brings us to section 2 on page 9, which is the appropriation, and then on page 10, the admin fee. We unfortunately don't have a suggestion for the committee on an appropriation. Like I said, we're talking $26,000 to $40-something thousand a person for these advanced degree programs. Don't know the committee's desire on how much they want to try to fund this. It's not cheap. So in terms of the administrative costs, in talking with Vice President Smith, and he certainly can testify, rather than a percentage, he'd prefer an amount. But well, I'll let him testify. It could be 7-8% if you're going to use a percentage of, or it could be $40,000, $40,000 to $50,000. With that, Mr. Chairman, those are the suggested amendments from the military department. We do appreciate the committee taking this up. It's a bit complicated, but we like the idea of trying to promote people working with veterans within our state.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Smith? Yes, Mr. O'Hearn, or Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We hear peer-to-peer all the time, so I'm a little concerned about striking on page 2, the veteran, because we hear a lot about peer-to-peer. You guys can jump in on that if you'd like, but I know that's one thing we always hear, peer-to-peer. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Hearn, and that was our discussion when we drafted the bill. We had several people be aware of the bill, and 2 came to me and said, well, you know, my dad struggles with mental health as a veteran of previous conflicts, and I'd really like to participate in this kind of program. And so that made us start thinking that maybe for professionals that we could get beyond the peer-to-peer, but it certainly was a consideration when the bill was drafted.
General?
Mr. Chairman, to Representative O'Hearn, just to amplify, we're really just trying to give more tools in the toolbox. We have Veterans Talking to Veterans, which has been a very successful program that we can get after. And this, as Mr. Smith said, just gives us a little more. If we've got somebody that's really good at it and we disqualify them from the veteran, given the circumstances that we have in the state in terms of our low population, we just wanted to get some of those barriers out of the way. But every veteran is different and every situation is different. And the more variables we have and the more tools we have to get after each separate one, we just think that's better.
Let's see here. Committee, yes, Senator Culp.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am concerned about page 2, line 17. I mean, the constant drumbeat is veteran, veteran, veteran. I understand we're talking about a balance between veterans and other folks, right? But if we turn this into something else, it'll turn into vanilla. It won't be, the purpose will be diluted. So that's why I'm opposed to changing the word veteran, because I want to keep it as pure as possible for that purpose. And I understand there's a downside to broadening it up, right? So my concern is that we make it too broad, it loses its purpose. And I guess I obviously like to hear what you think about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
General?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, let me make sure that I've got this right. When the one we're talking about on 17 is that anybody that's enrolled in the program has to be a veteran. So we, as we said, then we just limit ourselves to only that group of people that are veterans that then want to become a mental health provider. The population, obviously, we want to get after still is veterans, and I think that's, at least in our eye, that's what we're trying to solve. But we just didn't want to put that constraint on there that said you had to be a veteran in order to apply for this program. Clearly, that's the committee's decision. That was just our thought, is to, again, not put too many barriers in place that prevent people from even getting to that. But, that's certainly, I mean, we're not opposed to that, your thought there, sir. It's just gives more people the opportunity to go get trained and do it. Does that make sense? Did I understand?
Hold on just a second. I've got Representative Stivar, then Representative Pendergraft, and then we'll come over to Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In here, I know this program was, similar program was put up because Wyoming's short on social workers all over the state. And it was Workforce Services, Department of Health had a program like this, and it failed. They didn't get any takers. So what is this going to do? I mean, I think we need to look at this longer, that it's not ready for prime time. Because you've got the veterans that are in VA voc rehab that gets this paid for. They've got their GI Bill, and the veterans that want to be into the mental health are going into it. Very few do. But we need to look at this closer.
Committee, let's make sure we're sticking with questions. I understand where we're all coming from, and we've all got some concerns, but let's make sure we're sticking with the questions right now. We've got our people up here to testify on their portion of the bill. Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This thing began as a peer-to-peer, and it appears to me that we're kind of opening the Pandora's box, given that I already have questions in my own mind about whether or not this is legitimate purpose of government, whether we should even be involved in the first place. Now, once we establish this, now we want to open it up, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Would you agree?
General, we'll go ahead and allow that one, and I'm gonna reinforce my statement as soon as you're done answering that.
Yeah, Chairman Brown, Representative Pendergrass, I think you make a point. You know, when we originally came to the committee, we were trying to solve a fairly defined problem of veteran, military suicide. And we sort of threw out and developed over the committee sessions ever greater sort of ways to get after it. So to that point, I agree with you. I think we have definitely broadened the scope of what we originally had come to. And I think that was largely because we didn't, the initial solutions didn't have a lot of impact. And so we sort of started trying to figure out, okay, how could we really make impact? So I think your point's well taken in that it has grown from its original thought and what we originally came to the committee with.
Okay, Representative Berger?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and could we add, well, I guess my question is, if you were enlisted and you never were deployed, and you're not a veteran, but you're enlisted and you want to pursue this. I mean, I know it's peer-to-peer and I know we're saying veteran, but kind of what I'm thinking about, or what about those people who are enlisted, never have the opportunity or never had the opportunity to be deployed and become a veteran, but yet still want to help and be part of the part of the issue of helping veterans? Are they peer-to-peer, or do you absolutely have to be in the conflict?
Mr. Chairman,
Smith?
Representative Berger, on page 9, lines 9 through 13, we do a specific veteran definition within the bill, and it only requires a person to have served in the armed forces, the Army National Guard, Air National Guard, and who is discharged under conditions other than dishonorable. So there's no combat required, no overseas experience. If somebody just had a single tour or enlistment and got out, they would be classified as a veteran for purposes of this bill. And I'll certainly defer to Mr. Shepard. One of the interesting discussions we often have in the veteran world is veteran is defined differently for different purposes. But here we specifically added that, LSO did, because of that concern. We wanted to make sure it was very broad.
Okay. Committee, any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Appreciate you, gentlemen. Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Mike Smith, University of Wyoming. I will just try to run through the bill quickly and answer a couple of the outstanding questions from the university's standpoint. First of all, on the bottom of page 2, the suggestion from the military department to add a PhD in psychology. I would just add to that we do not have a master's of psychology at the university. We have a bachelor's and a PhD. So we do have masters in counseling. We do have masters in social work. Don't ask me how things roll that way, but that's the way it goes. So our comments would be consistent with that suggestion. As Mr. Smith mentioned, general cost of attendance for graduate programs for a resident student would be $26,732 this year. Non-resident would be $40,532. So, yeah, as far as an appropriation, if, just take the number of folks that you think it is the right number to help and do the math, it's pretty straightforward. I would suggest the numbers that we have provided previously, There are not currently a ton of students in those three programs, the PhD of Psychology, the Masters of Counseling, and the Masters of Social Work. I think they're around 10, maybe slightly under that currently enrolled amongst those programs. So that gives you a sense of military-connected students enrolled in those programs. Sorry, I'm not talking about the whole shebang, but we look to not just veterans but also spouses or dependents that come to our Veteran Services Center. They take advantage of all those services that we provide. And so those numbers I just mentioned would be, more focused on the purpose of the bill. And Mr. Smith correctly conveyed my thoughts on the administrative cost. I really would just leave that to you all. I get the percentage wise, but there's also always just a certain amount that it takes to get things rolling and going, regardless of whether there's 5 students or 10 or 15. It wouldn't be a significant amount, but given our experience in some of the other programs, I thought 40 to 50 grand seemed right. My prior testimony was 5 to 10% of the overall appropriation. And again, but always dependent on what that amount is. We wouldn't need 5 or 10% of $5 million, but might want that if it's 500,000 is the appropriation, if that makes sense. I'd happy to stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stiver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you said it, I didn't catch it. How many veterans we have in these programs now at the university?
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman,
Of UW.
Representative Stivar, I believe we have currently enrolled military-connected students, 6 in the Masters of Counseling. And I don't have current numbers, but I'm going to roughly say 1 in the PhD psychology and 1 in the Masters of Social Work. The numbers I got were spread out over 5 years. So we had 5 students over 5 years that were military connected / veteran in social work. So I'm kind of just averaging, saying 1 a year. We've had a couple PhD psychology over that time period. So 1 a year would be a little more than over 5 years what we've done. But so if that gives you a sense, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you think this program would entice more veterans to go into this?
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, I really don't know. I do know that financial incentives do tend to attract people into programs, but I'm not an expert in this area or I guess today much of anything. Thank you.
All right. Committee, any further questions for Mr. Smith of UW? We'll just keep on clarifying that. Okay. Appreciate you, gentlemen. Mr. Shepherd, I did not even give you a chance. Do you have anything to add to this beyond what's already been discussed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim Shepherd, Director, Wyoming Veterans Commission. I guess what I would say to the committee is just, I look at this as just what the general said, another tool in the toolbox. And that when we're talking about, at the end of the day, this thing called suicide, when we talk about one suicide, that's one too many. If in any way that this could help to reduce that number, it's a good thing. I did want to add a comment. Our veterans talking to veterans, we don't actually call it a peer-to-peer. It's a veteran to veteran, just a little bit different nuance that Dr. Julie Elledge from Mentor Agility, who are the brains behind the Veterans Talking to Veterans program, constantly tries to beat into me. But the thing that to me is remarkable about veterans talking to veterans is that, yes, at the grassroots, it is about a veteran to a veteran. But behind the scenes, the mental health expertise is provided by Dr. Julie Elledge. No one in veterans talking to veterans, whether they're a coach or a participant, is concerned about the background of Dr. Julie Elledge, other than that she's a doctor in psychology. So my point being, I think the more we open that lens on the mental health expertise side, the greater our opportunity to help our veterans and greater the opportunity to reduce that thing called our suicide rate. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Shepherd? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Shepherd. We will go ahead and open this bill up for public comment. Is there any public comment on 25 LSO 0083, Wyoming's investment in veterans' mental health? Seeing none, do we have anybody online for this one? I didn't think so. All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment, bring the bill back to the dais. Committee, what is your pleasure? It is moved by Senator Brennan, seconded by Representative O'Hearn. All right, committee, with it being moved and seconded, there is quite a bit of work to do to this bill. Let's go ahead and do this page by page as we move along. Let's start out, page 1 is fine. Going into page 2, is there any discussion and or amendments on page 2?
I would move that we.
Oh, hit your mic for me, please.
Can you hear me? I would move that we amend page 2, line 17, and take out Romanet to be a veteran.
Okay, it's been moved. Any second? Okay, that motion dies for a lack of second. Anything further on page 2? Okay, moving on to page.
Flip.
Oh, okay, guys, let's keep on going here. Representative Berger.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to move that we take the recommendation and add or PhD in psychology.
Okay, and that is a conforming amendment from the military department. Is that correct? You're looking at that, okay?
I'll second that, but I'll also add, if he agrees.
Thank you.
I'll also add, if agreeable, that all conforming amendments everywhere else will.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that.
I like that.
So the motion is to make the conforming amendments related to PhD, making sure that we'll just say this, the conforming amendments to make sure that the coursework lines up, and I'm getting the head shake from Ms. Hanson that she understands what the motion is. Is there any discussion on the motion? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably not doing myself any favors popularity-wise, but by voting against this motion, you hamstring the bill and in effect keep it of less effect.
Okay, anything further? All right, we'll move to vote. All those in favor of the motion to fix the language in there as so stated by the military department for PhD, getting the coursework corrected throughout the bill, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. That motion passes. Page 2, anything further? All right, on to page 3. Anything on page 3? Okay, I know that there's gonna be something. Here we go. Mr. Co-Chairman?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll throw out and replacing the blank percentages on line 23, just do 25%.
Okay, been moved by Senator Boner, seconded by Senator Pappas. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That motion passes. Moving on to page 4, we have another blank area here on line 4. Any motions? Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, I'll request that we use the recommended 3 years.
Okay, it's been moved. Seconded by Co-Chairman Boner. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adding 3 years in place of the highlighted text, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. That motion passes. Working through the staff comments on page 4 and 5, going into page 6, is there any discussion? Page 6 at the bottom. Moving on to page 7. Okay, I do have a quick question, Mr. Smith. If I can get you to come back up here just really briefly. Really, this boils down to more the administration of this program. On lines 11 through 15, we have the loan repayment options for 5 years. And actually, Mr. Smith, the other Mr. Smith might also have this information. My understanding is USERRA would protect if somebody was serving active duty and they were deployed. Is there any other type of discussion that we need to consider there, that if they are active duty for more than 5 years, repayment clauses, anything like that? And does that impact the university basically holding those loans out? I guess so. It's kind of a two-part question.
The two Smiths are looking.
Mr. Chairman? Might I add to that? Aren't we dealing only with veterans, folks that are finished with their service? They shouldn't be deployed.
Mr. Chairman, in answer to Senator Pappas's question, they could still be deployed because you can still be a veteran for the program because it only requires you to have served honorably. If you were in your next enlistment, you would still qualify under the definition of veteran to be in this degree program. As Senator Pappas is aware, we have many part-time Army and Air Guard members who are UW students who also deploy. In terms of the chairman's question about the 5 years deferral, I know from a military standpoint, the deferral, there is military protections in terms of going after a loan repayment while someone is on active duty, especially if they're deployed. There's some additional protections there. That doesn't make the debt go away, it defers it. So this is in line with my understanding of federal law.
Okay. Mr. Smith, any concerns on holding those loans open or anything along those lines and ensuring that we're able to collect on those when and if it comes to that point?
Mr. Chairman, I don't anticipate any issue with that. That's part of the existing programs, not this specific provision, but deferral during continuing your education, other things. I don't anticipate an issue.
Okay, all right. Yes, Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Say you're on your deployment and you're already a veteran and you qualify as a veteran, and then you get a dishonorable discharge on your second deployment. What would happen then, or how would that be handled, is my question.
Mr. Smith of the Military Department.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, great question. My understanding of the way this would work, if they already had the loan because they had honorably served previously, that loan would be okay, but they would be disqualified from further loans.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hypothetically, and I know this has happened, because I know at least 3 veterans that graduated from the master's program that were all sent letters from the Air Force to bring them in as first lieutenants, if they were so wished, because of that program. Will the loan still keep going? If they actually go back and re-enlist or go to OCS because they don't have any brains, but, you know, that's the problem. That's what I'd like to know.
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, that is a great question. Under what is on lines 11 through 15 on page 7, it's not more than 5 years. So they would still owe the loan after that 5-year deferral, even if they were a career military member.
Okay. All right, committee, let's keep on moving. Thank you very much for your answers there, gentlemen. Moving on through lines, or page 7, on to page 8. Any amendments here? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 9. Page 9, we do have line 17, the appropriation. Anybody want to make a stab in the dark here? Anybody? We're going to set up a program. We got to have some money with it. Okay, Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I'll just put a number, because I know it's going to change. It may change drastically, but I will throw out $250,000.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Motion is by Senator Pappas for $250,000, seconded by Representative Berger. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion for $250,000 appropriation in section 2, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That motion passes. The next portion of that is, where does that money come from? Anybody want to make that stab? Representative Berger.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion that that money would come from the general fund.
Okay,
Start
been
there.
motioned. Seconded from Senator Pappas. Any discussion? $250,000 from the general fund to get this program up and started. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Passes, but barely. All right. Division being called. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That passes 7-6 without the chairman's vote. Okay. I said it just barely, right? Page 10. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think that maybe, I mean, what are the alternatives, to that? And that's, I think we should have maybe a little bit more discussion there. 'Cause we have,
Sure.
General fund comes to mind, but there could be others.
Okay. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Co-Chairman. We had discussed briefly, if I recall correctly, about taking this out of the block grant for UW.
Anybody want to make that motion? Okay, so did you make the motion? Okay, so that was a motion, so moved by Representative Pendergraft, seconded by Representative O'Hearn. Any discussion on that to take this away now from the general fund that was approved to the block grant? Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Okay, so we had this discussion before, just technical in nature for staff. So this will require bringing in the UW section, section 67, just from a technical drafting perspective. I mean, something we could easily do, but just understand that's what the bill would look like. We'd have to bring in that section of the budget bill, and it's not as easy as just inserting UW block grant and instead of general fund. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is a policy choice. We certainly can, but yes, it would require bringing in the whole table of UW's section 67 of the budget bill, decreasing the state aid by $250,000, because that's the appropriation amount. There could be conflicts, but that is a policy choice for you guys to make. It can be done, but.
Okay, Mr. Co-Chairman, any further thing?
Nope, sounds like we can do it. Just understand that's what it looks like, and it requires some coordination. I understand with the budget bill. So.
Okay, committee, anything further on that? Seeing none, motion is to bring in section 67, do the technical corrections on this, and take this and take it out of the block grant. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. That motion passes. Division, all those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That motion passes. Moving on to page 10, percentage for administrative costs on this. I think, my personal opinion at this point, it kind of becomes a moot point because we're taking this out of the block grant. So personally, I will make the motion at this point to strike lines 7 through 12. Seconded by Representative Stivar. Any discussion? All those in favor signify, oh, yep. Mr.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just making sure. So, I mean, the benefit of this provision is we ensure that a certain amount of the funds go towards the actual program instead of administrative costs. And so regardless of, the source of the funds, it may have value. I'm just trying to think through this here on the fly, but, so we don't want, especially now they're taking out the block grant, what would prevent them from spending $250,000 on administrative costs and nothing changes?
That's a good point. Ms. Hanson, yes.
Mr. Chairman, pulling in the table would require a footnote. So in that footnote, you could set aside some money for administrative costs or a percentage of the $250,000. I think you could do that in the footnote. That would be required by pulling in the budget bill table, so.
And I think that would probably be more appropriate than putting this in session law, the way that it's developed. But thank you, Ms. Hanson, and I appreciate Senator Brennan for catching my attention there. So any questions, any further discussion? Motion is to remove the section B, subsection B, line 7 through 12 on page 11, or is that 10? 10. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That motion passes. All right, and then that moves us down into the effective immediately committee. That moves us through the bill. Any further discussion and/or amendments? Representative Pendergraft? Yeah, we'll not do that in a, Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to add that there is a sunset date in this bill. Make that very clear to everybody. There is a sunset date, 2026. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. I'll make that very clear. There is a sunset date in this bill. And I think we had a pretty good discussion on that of the last time. I think it started at 4 years and it moved to 6. And then I think we all kind of landed at 10 when we adjusted this last time around. So takes a little bit of time to get it up and running, those types of things. So any further discussion? All right. I am going to go ahead and explain my vote. While I certainly have a heart for this particular topic, I think this is a much larger topic than just the veteran side of things. I think this is a much, much larger discussion. And while we have a heart near and dear to our committee here for veterans, I believe this is pigeonholing us as a state and putting money into a very, very particular cause that may have some unintended consequences, in my opinion. And so I will be voting against this bill as a committee-sponsored bill only because I do believe that this is a larger discussion that needs to be had with mental health in general. We did hear that from Ms. Davis with the governor's office as well. There's quite a bit of an overlap in what the committee has been doing with the labor health as well. So that is my discussion. Anything further? Mr. Co-Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been going back and forth on this one. I guess the biggest question in my mind is, will it be put to good use? Or I'm sure folks are going to, register and complete these academic programs that would be beneficial. I'm just wondering whether, how many people are going to use it. And, but I was just pointing out, this will sunset in 2026. We are not increasing expenditures as a part of this, so I'm willing to give it a chance. I think this is a worthwhile cause and a very good expenditure of UW funds to focus on a group of folks who, is more than just a focus of this committee, but as we all know, has a unique set of challenges when it comes to mental health. So I'm willing to give it a chance, and that's why I'll be voting yes.
Representative Stivar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also a no vote. The concept's good, but I think it needs a lot more work done to it. And we do need to bring labor health into this to make sure we can get this done right. So that's why I'm a no vote.
Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be also a no vote on this, and I'd like to explain why. And it was what the chairman spoke about, having a unified front on dealing with mental health. An ad hoc Heinz 57 mixture of all different programs is probably going to end up less beneficial than a thought out system of dealing with mental health, suicide, the whole ball of wax is it's broader than the military. And if we start chiseling off pieces with special segments here and there, I don't think that serves the state of Wyoming as well as it would if we had a unified approach that we went forward with. And that's why I'm a no vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Committee, anything further? Question being called. If you would please, it looks like you're having troubles with Zoom, so we will go ahead. Mr. Moritz, just so you're aware, you are on our cameras, so just giving you the heads up. That we're all partying back here when they can't be seen on the screen, and you are. So with that, Eve, if I can have you please call roll call on 24 LSO 125, or 25 LSO 83, my goodness. As amended, please.
This is a roll call vote for 25 LSO 0083, Wyoming Investments in Veterans Mental Health as amended. Senator Brennan?
Aye.
Senator Furphy?
Aye.
Senator Kolb?
No?
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Representative Berger?
Aye.
Representative Nemec?
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn?
Aye.
Representative Obermueller?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
No.
Representative Smith?
No.
Representative Stivar?
No?
Representative Wiley?
Aye.
Co-Chairman Boner?
Aye.
Chairman Brown?
No.
Nine to five, nine aye.
Okay, we will be sponsoring that. Mr. Co-Chairman, do you want to just discuss who will be carrying these once we finish this off? What's your preference on that?
Right, I think the idea would be to see what overall the bills the committee has, we make that decision. Usually I try to divvy up, transportation versus military, but we'll just see if that's an even distribution or not. So
That'll work. Okay. Committee, that takes us up, it's 10:05 or 10:06. We've worked through fairly quickly here this morning, so we're going to take about a 15-minute break before we roll into the next one. So we will be back at 10:20, please. We're going to say calling all committee members out in the hallway. Well, see, I've learned as chairman that it takes us 3 minutes, even though you say you're going to start something. So you got to start wrangling up 3 minutes prior to you saying when it was. So we will get started right back at 10:20. All right, looks like the committee's filing in here, so we are going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go right into our last discussion with the military department. This is 25 LSO 0255, Board and Commission Veteran Ex Officio Members. Ms. Hanson, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, Staff Attorney LSO, presenting Bill Draft 25 LSO 255, version 0.4, Boards and Commissions Veteran Ex Officio Members. This bill draft was requested at the committee's September meeting, so I'll start by walking through the bill draft. Section 1 begins on page 1, lines 10 through 12. Page 2, lines 2 through 11, amends Wyoming Statute 19-14-107 governing the Wyoming Veterans Commission. This new language requires the Wyoming Veterans Commission to recommend members of the public representing veterans and veteran services to be appointed by the governor to the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees and the Wyoming Community College Commission to serve as ex officio non-voting members. Page 2, lines 13 through 23, and page 3, lines 2 through 4, amend the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees ex officio members statute by making conforming amendments and adding a member of the public representing veterans and veteran services as an ex officio member of the University of Wyoming Board of Trustees. Page 3, lines 6 through 13, adds a member of the public representing veterans and veteran services to the statute governing the non-voting ex officio members of the Wyoming Community College Commission. Page 3, lines 15 through 18, provides an immediate effective date, and I'll stand for any questions.
That one was a lot shorter for you, Ms. Hanson. Any questions for Ms. Hanson on this bill? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Hanson, for the information on that. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Smith and the general.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We and of course the Veterans Commission are very supportive of this. If the committee recalls in the previous hearings, we were trying to get after the veteran services at UW in our community colleges. UW, the committee heard testimony from, they have kind of the gold standard of veteran services offices. Some of the outlying community colleges are less served, taking it out of Hyde often. In terms of meeting veteran needs. The idea here was to put somebody who would look after veteran needs on the UW board and the community college board so that rather than a full-time position, which was, as you may recall, one of the original bills. And so we are, of course, very supportive of that. We think it's a good idea just for the continuity between those entities. And with that, we'll stand for any questions from the committee.
Okay. Committee, any questions for Mr. Smith and or the general regarding this bill draft? Seeing none, this is a pretty straightforward bill. Thank you, gentlemen. With that, we will go ahead and open this up for public comment. Is there any public comment? Anybody locally? And I think I had one originally. Do we still have that representation? Yep, Mr. Moritz.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ben Moritz. I'm the Executive Director of the Community College Commission. Sorry for crashing the party earlier. I think you were a little ahead of schedule, and sorry I was jumping in, but kudos to you on an efficiently run meeting. The commission, our staff, were very much in support of this bill. We were very much in support of having an additional position in the agency to support veteran services across the colleges. That bill did not move forward. We think that this also gets at some of that. The non-voting member of the commission it would not be quite as impactful, but it would still be very helpful in providing that level of communication across the colleges and the university, and that level of support and advocacy in that role. So we have no problems with that and are in support of that, and look forward to having another voice for our veteran students.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moritz. Sorry, I have been mispronouncing your name for the past 8 years. Any questions for Mr. Moritz with the community colleges? Seeing none, and I see that Mr. Smith either took off back over to Laramie and or is still out there. So we will go ahead and close public comment. Thank you, Mr. Moritz. Appreciate you being here and taking the time out of your day. Committee, we'll bring this bill back to the, that was public comment. Nope, that was all we had for public comment online, right? So we'll close public comment, bring the bill back here to the dais. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by O'Hearn, seconded by Berger. Let's briefly and quickly walk through the bill. This is fairly simple. Any changes on page 1? Let's just go into page 2. Let's go into the meat of the bill. Page 2, any changes? Moving into page 3. And that is it. Committee, any discussion? Representative Pendergraft, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be a no on this bill. I think at its heart, it is hollow. This is not in any way to diss the veterans. I myself am one, and there are several in this room that I am friends with. And yet either one of us, if we were placed on that board, would likely vote entirely different. My point is that just because you're a veteran doesn't mean you represent all veterans exactly the same way. The Wyoming Constitution says we all as individuals are equal. And I think it's entirely possible for me as a representative of Sheridan, for example, to represent a number of different people there, different backgrounds, different ideas, different perspectives. And I guess I just think this is an unnecessary bill, so I'll be a no.
I do want to make it very clear that this is an ex officio non-voting member. So, and the representation for this particular bill is to represent the veterans and veteran services at the 2 locations, or yes, 2 boards, multiple
Chairman.
Locations. So,
Yes, ex officio does not have a vote.
correct.
However, does have influence and does have the ability to persuade.
Absolutely. Okay. Committee, anybody else? Okay. Seeing none, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote on 25 LSO 255 version .4.
This is a roll call vote for 25 LSO 0255, Board and Commissions, Veterans Ex Officio members. Senator Brennan. Aye. Senator Furphy. Aye. Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Representative Berger.
Aye.
Representative Nemec.
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Obermueller.
No.
Representative Pendergraft.
No.
Representative Smith.
No.
Representative Stivar.
No.
Representative Wiley. Aye. Co-Chairman Boner.
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
10 aye, 4 no.
Okay. That passes. Thank you very much. Military Department, thank you guys very, very much for today. We blasted through about a half hour ahead of schedule, so appreciate your guys' succinctness and everything else. Again, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate the time that we've been able to spend with you guys, or I've been able to spend with you guys over the past 8 years is sitting on this committee. So thank you guys very much. Mr. Shepard, same goes to you. With that, anybody have anything else for the Military Department? Seeing none. Y'all are excused.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate, just really quickly, if I could thank those members that are going off the committee. Certainly appreciate working with all of you over the past, this past session. appreciate the mentoring and all the work that you've done for the state of Wyoming. It's incredible. We have such support in this state for our military, and it's a large part because of the leadership you all exhibit. And finally, to the two chairmen, again, thank you for your leadership. This obviously is a very complicated and interesting issues that we tackle, and you've been very clear-eyed in your leadership for this. And I just want to say on behalf of all the members of the military, thank you for all the work you do. I know it seems like early for holidays, but please be careful. Have a great holiday season, and look to see hopefully some of you at least on the other side when we go into session. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to play some musical chairs here, and we are going to move right into our next topic, which is our 11 o'clock topic for AM highway funding. The first bill draft that we actually have listed is the severance tax distribution for the highway fund. We'll go ahead and tackle that one first, Ms. Hanson. And yes, Representative Obermueller is going to work this with Ms. Hanson as well.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, Staff Attorney, LSO, presenting Bill Draft 25, LSO 258, version 0.5 Severance Tax Distribution Highway Fund. This bill draft was requested at the committee's September meeting. I'll start by going through the bill draft. Section 1 begins on page 1, lines 9 and 10, by amending the statute dealing with severance tax distributions. The amendments in this bill draft deal with what is commonly referred to as the 1% severance tax. Page 2, line 12 is a conforming amendment changing the date from fiscal year 2028 to 2025 for the funds to be deposited equally to the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and to the Common School account with the Permanent Land Fund. Page 2, lines 16 and 17 is the new language which provides that for fiscal year 2026 and thereafter, these funds shall be deposited to the Highway Fund. Section 2 on page 2, line 19 repeals subsection B6 of this section and also repeals subsection F. The staff comment on the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3 provides the repealed provisions for the committee's reference. Section 3 on page 3, line 29 provides an effective date of July 1, 2025, and I'll stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions for Ms. Hanson? Okay, seeing none. Representative Obermueller, this is kind of your baby, so we'll have you walk us through your CPA spreadsheet here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If you look at, it's a two-sided sheet, as you see. Let's look at side A first. The ink is still dripping off this page from the latest Craig report. So if you were to look at table 5, in the latest Craig, you would see these numbers, and which is the severance tax distribution as it's estimated to be for fiscal year 26. So this is a 1-year look, not a 2-year look. So in that distribution, the general fund and budget reserve classified together is $335,400,000. It represents 49.2% of the total distribution. The permanent funds, when you look at the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund constitutional piece, the 1.5% of the valuation of minerals, it's $165,100,000. And then the 1% statutory piece is divided between the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and the Common School Permanent Land Fund. That represents a distribution of 40% of the total. The Highway Fund next, and the county road construction, those two, you can see the numbers there. The Highway Fund being 1% of the total. And then the rest of the sheet shows the other earmarks commonly known as under the cap distributions to these other funds, making up the total estimated severance tax, $682,100,000. So if you flip the page to the other side, This demonstrates the effect of this bill, so you can see what the bill actually looks like as a distribution. So you get down to the permanent funds on the left-hand side. The statutory pieces are what we're dealing with in this bill. And this bill moves those amounts of the 1% to the highway fund, so that the effect of that is that the permanent funds now receive 24.2% of the total distribution, and the highway fund represents 17%, and everything else on the schedule currently is the same. So that's what this bill does. The justification for this bill can be made on several accounts. The relative priorities of the permanent funds allocation versus the highway fund is the subject of my remarks, and I think you can see there when you're looking at on Schedule A, when you're looking at 40% going to the permanent funds, 1% going to the highway funds. It begs the question of, is there any equivalency? Can you find any equivalency here in terms of policy decisions regarding the allocation of these monies? The justification for the permanent funds, or putting money, this statutory amount into the permanent funds, is that that the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund is an intergenerational fund, and we have to take care of future generations. And I would submit to you that while this is true, as legislators, you're faced with finding balance between many things that affect the future. And I would say chief among those is our road system. And I think we're all aware at this point from previous testimony that there is a need in that area to fund the road program. But that's not the basis of my remarks. I'm going to leave that to others who will testify today. I want to just keep my remarks to the relationship between the permanent funds and the highway funds. When this idea has been raised in the past, the defense of the permanent funds has come into play pretty strongly, and because of the intergenerational nature of those funds. And while it is true that the permanent funds are intergenerational, I would suggest that there are other intergenerational concerns of equal, if not greater importance, the transportation system being chief among them. The health of our families and our economy is dependent on the growth and condition of our highways, and I would reiterate the growth and condition. We don't have any money for any growth, and there are corridors in our state that definitely need growth. The second idea about the permanent funds is that they are is the revenue replacement theory. That is, as severance taxes go down, we can solve the problem of reduced income with investment income. This, I submit to you, is a false equivalency. Underlying severance taxes is an entire economic foundation of companies and jobs, families and schools, suppliers and professional services, the same foundational pieces that undergird the construction industry. State investment income has almost none of these characteristics. Nothing looks more like a welfare state than a jobless economy sustained by passive income. Supporting the vital construction industry seems to be the better bet on our future. Third, inflation proofing. This is an argument we often hear about putting the 1% in. I have an LLC that has farmland in it. I'm under no obligation to inflation-proof that LLC for the future. Why? It's because the farmland, as you know, obviously is self-correcting in relation to inflation over time. Our investments with the Treasurer's Office have that same characteristics. As we've gone into the capital accounts, this fund should be self-correcting. The $10 billion that's in the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund, if you had that money personally and took it into an investment advisor, he wouldn't be asking you, how are you planning to inflation-proof this fund? You would be asking him, how are you going to beat inflation with this fund, right? So I look at that inflation argument as being an argument coming out of the days before we had investments in the capital markets. And if done right, that fund should stay relative to the rest of our cost of government about where it is now, which is, if you look at the current Craig report, our investment income is roughly 23% of our estimated revenue sources. And that's before recognizing any capital gain monies out of that for the year we're looking at here, so 23%. So I think, looking forward, if you want to think of it in terms of how much of our government should be paid for by passive investments, if it tracks along at this rate, you have to really wonder if we really, from a policy standpoint, want a lot more of our government paid for by this passive method. In summary, I believe that we need to face intergenerational challenges from many perspectives. Intergenerational success requires a diverse approach, and this committee, I think, can be a part of that approach of finding diversity to the future of our state and the success. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll pass the baton on to others who have their own perspective on this topic. Thank you.
Before we let you free, we'll have questions for you. It looks like I've already got one. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Obermueller. Just thank you for all you've done over the years. I know that sitting beside you a year ago was very useful to me. And I appreciate what you've done here, and you've laid things out in a very transparent fashion. That's what Representative Obermueller does, so thank you for that. I'm looking at a possible detriment, some might say, to the Common School Permanent Land Fund. What would your answer be to someone who says you are hurting the schools?
Representative Obermueller.
Once again, the Common School Permanent Land Fund has its own sources of revenue, and this being designed as an inflation-proofing mechanism within it. What I am saying is that this fund has its own method of growth plus its own revenue sources that will sustain that fund.
Committee, anything further for Representative Obermueller? All right, join us back up here, good sir. Thank you, Ms. Hanson. Thank you, Representative Obermueller. We'll now move on to the department. Director Westby, welcome. Got you guys about 15 minutes ahead of schedule here and joining us, so appreciate you guys being down here ready to roll. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darren Westby, Director of Wyoming Department of Transportation. Thanks for the heads up. It did allow us a little bit of time to get down here. Really appreciate the effort put into the bill. LSO's draft is great. Representative Obermueller bringing it forward. I don't know that I can explain it from an economic standpoint any better than he did. Matter of fact, I would rather not even try in that regard, because the questions that could be asked would be better probably suited by somebody with an economist background to help with that. In regards to the need, I think over the past several meetings, we've discussed the need and discussed the intent. Looking at it from pragmatically on our side of the house, when we're seeing 40, 50, 60% increase in inflationary costs to do what we've done over the past several decades versus putting more into savings. That was kind of our conversation when we were having with representatives and several of you on this committee. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I can go back through the need and some of the things that we've discussed in previous meetings. or I could just stand for any more questions. Your prerogative, sir.
Representative Pendergraft has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, congratulations on almost 2 years now.
Almost 2 years, Mr. Chairman.
So I say that because my question goes back to 2012. So you may not have the information on hand, but I go back and I look at the budget ask in 2012. The Department of Transportation was $270 million. In 2024, the budget ask was $250 million. That's $20 million less than you asked in 2012. Well, you didn't ask. And in that time, you mentioned the inflationary costs that have been there. Could you perhaps put that into perspective? Why are you asking for what you're asking for, I guess, is without getting into the weeds? Just wanted to.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you for the question. I might bring up a phone of friends with some history to try to help me backfill some of those questions. I know Dennis will probably be on his way up. I think a lot
He is
of
now.
a lot of the conversation that's been had about what was requested in the past versus what wasn't is the difference probably between the two budgets that we have. We have the legislative budget and the commission budget. A majority of the commission budget is the federal and the state side combined. The legislative budget are a lot of the bolted on components that happened when we became a Department of Transportation versus a highway department, when we brought on aeronautics and public safety communication and those types of programs. The ask versus the receive are two different things, right? I think the ask could always go up. I know we've been over the last several, at least in my understanding of government, when I was in my other agency, the request would always be as consistent and steady as possible. No major increases. That was just the environment in which we lived. And so I'll let Dennis speak to the history of the ask, but we've definitely been flat from a stateside perspective for the last 20 years plus probably. And that's in relation to many things of, we saw a 10-cent increase in gas tax, but we saw a commensurate amount of decrease in general fund that we were receiving. We saw an increase in registration and a decrease. So our revenue streams have been flat, albeit we've seen some increase in revenue, alternative revenue streams, but the effort to try to remove YDOT off the general fund, there's a lot of the balancing act with that. And that's probably why you see that flat line on the revenue streams over the last 20 years. Going back to the inflation and things have cost more over the last 20 years, we should have probably been seeing an increase to match inflation to ensure that we could maintain our road system at the level that you all, we definitely want to have our system be made. So Dennis, can you add any more to the history?
Mr. Byrne, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it.
My name is Dennis Byrne. I'm the CFO with YDOT. I think the director hit on really some of the high topics. Largely, the question from Representative Pendergraft is specific to our legislative side of the house. As you know, we have two, the commission and the legislative. One thing that I would point out in that time kind of goes back to what the director has already kind of indicated, and that is, if we go back in history just a little bit in terms of revenue, total revenue for the department, there was a time YDOT was receiving as much as $200 million of biennium from the general fund for transportation needs. That has dried up over time. We're to the point now where our general fund revenue from the legislature is about 8.6 million a biennium, and that is specific for WildLink. So significant decreases in general fund dollars, significant increases in inflation, as has already been stated. The one thing to note, and the director did hit on this as well, we're seeing a little bit more money on the revenue side, specifically from the Fed. So we are seeing more dollars from the federal government. However, it's not enough to address the needs that we have. So that full circle brings us back to the need for more revenue and the conversations we're having here today.
Mr. Chairman, if I can add just a little bit more to that. Our concern, looking crystal ball going into the future, and understanding where the federal dollars come from. A lot of the federal dollars on the Highway Trust Fund that come back as a formula back to the state of Wyoming and all the other states is derived mainly from the national gas tax, fuel tax. Those are depleting as the efficiencies have gone up. So the federal government backfills the delta in there with general fund dollars. Not 100% sure where that general fund comes from. I'm not in that section very much, but we all understand that when they get into that crunch, they potentially could be doing something else. It's our taxpayer, our income that we send to the, in lieu of taxes to the federal government that comes back. So we're a proponent of the federal dollar because we're paying into it, therefore we're getting our cut back. We're paying gas tax, so we're getting that back. Our concern is that delta. Will they continue to backfill that delta out of the general fund to make the Highway Trust Fund formula that comes to us into the future? We're probably good for the next 2 years until this next National Transportation Funding Bill sunsets and they start working on the next one. I'm just really worried about what that happens. So right now we're 70% funded on the federal side, 30% on the state side. If we see that decrease in federal dollar, our percentage is going to look great, but the amount of roads that we can maintain and build is going to go backwards. And so the effort this interim, and I really appreciate your opportunity to allow us to bring this information and interest to you, is we really would like to not have to rely as much on the federal government on the funds that come in, because if it does cut back and they cut back $200 million in the next funding bill, and we're not in a good place now to shore that up, we'll be going backwards significantly. And so I really appreciate the great conversation that through the entire interim to educate you, as well as to get us in our pitch really put together on the future of the highway system in the state of Wyoming.
We also have some very, very good historical knowledge here from Senator Pappas that would like to add a little bit to that as well. Not only serving on this committee, but also as the liaison to the commission for many, many years. So, Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the point, I just want to bring up what Representative Obermiller mentioned about growth. And as a liaison to the commission, along with Representative O'Hearn, we both know that growth is no longer happening, and we're in maintenance mode, and we've been in maintenance mode for a long time. And frankly, we can't continue to stay in that mode. So maybe back in 2012, we were spending more money, but we were growing. We're not doing that now. In fact, it's the opposite. Our roads are deteriorating. We've been trying to find ways to fund highway construction for the past, I don't know how many years. I mean, we've looked at road usage charges, we've visited tolling a couple of times, and certainly nothing has happened to create additional revenue to put on our roads and highways, and our roads and bridges. And frankly, our roads and bridges and the entire surface transportation system in Wyoming is vital. It's critical. It's very critical to our number one industry, tourism, right? Our oil and gas folks need it. Ag needs it. Our construction industry needs it. We need our roads, and we've got to find a way to be able to reverse the trend, not just be in maintenance mode, but also in growth mode. And so I think that's the reason why the difference between 2012 and now is we just been cinching our belt back because we've taken the money away from the general fund money away, and there's no other funds to reach out to, and so they don't ask because they know they won't get. Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman. Senator, thank you for that. And we get requests a lot out of each one of your districts. You know, we'll look at Laramie and the 287 South. We had a great conversation at the last interim topic meeting about fresh coming off the funeral services of that accident that happened in Colorado. 59 going north out of Douglas and right into Gillette, you know, for the coal industry and the oil and gas industry. Highway 30 and southwest, you know, the explosion of everything that's happening down there. We're probably behind on that project as well, trying to make that a bigger 4-lane highway into Idaho. I could go on and on about pretty much every district in here has a potential wish list. I have a wish list. But there's no way in good business practice can I stand here and tell you, yes, we'll go do that. I'll reprioritize all the maintenance, all the peanut butter that we spread across the bread. I'll take some of that maintenance off the books and put $62 million to build a 4-lane from Laramie to the state line. But who's gonna maintain it? So these bills that we have coming for you today are bills that will help us not only look at capacity, but also help us maintain what we build into the future as well. And I think it's good, sound business practice. I applaud the agency for the last several decades before I got here to understand the position that they were in, as Senator Pappas talked about, that we had to force ourselves into preservation mode. I guarantee you I have several hundred engineers back at the building that would love to do nothing more than design and build a new road. We haven't done that in a long time, so I know they're itching to do that. To do a mill and overlay from an engineering perspective, it's not very sexy, you know? So trying to figure out how we can accomplish all the state's goals and look at the development, the growth that is either needed or beyond needed. Now's the time for us to really start focusing our efforts on prioritizing in an appropriate way.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Pendergraft. I'm going to go back to Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Pappas, for your remarks. I believe it was about 2 years ago, Senator Pappas asked you, Mr. Byrne, what you felt like your shortfall was. About a year later, about a year ago, I asked you the same thing. And just as we're looking at this sheet that we have in front of us, we kind of put things in perspective. Where do you put your shortfall today? Where do you think you're at?
Mr. Byrne, if memory serves me right, it was just north of 600 million total, but I will,
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sure you have a running total on that, right?
We do have some updated information on that and pulling it up now, but the number's between $400 and $500 million, and that's an annual number in shortfall. Now that covers the entire organization. So from roads to patrol to WildLink to operations, equipment, buildings, that covers the spectrum, but it's north of 400 million.
Anybody? Senator Pappas?
Yes, and I just wanted to add one other thing that it's important for us to know. As someone in the construction, you know, who's been in the construction business for a long time, putting money into savings, which that's where it's going right now, versus building infrastructure that we know we will need. The amount of inflation that's happened in the construction industry and still continues always outpaces the return that we get. So a lot of people say, okay, we're going to inflation proof it. We're going to put it in there and we're going to have this money for future generations. That's true. But in the meantime, we're going to spend more money than we're making so that our future generations will have the roads and highways. So, you know, you may be making, I don't know, say you're making 10% on your investments. Well, inflation in the construction industry could easily be 12 and 15%. every year. So if you know you're gonna have to build it, then you're, money ahead, putting it in the roads now, instead of just putting it in the bank.
Representative Obermueller? Let's, by the way, let's go ahead and come back to questions, please. We're coming down the road of doing a lot of explanation of personal feelings, and we certainly have some good discussion here and to be had, but let's make sure we're sticking to questions. Representative Obermueller?
In that case, I'll pass.
Thank you, Representative Obermueller. I do appreciate that. Committee, is there any further questions for WYDOT at this point? Yes, Senator Kolb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've to say I have deep concerns is an understatement about this type of change. It's monumental. It's a big deal. What I'd really like to talk about, though, is your vertical construction. And how do you make decisions about vertical construction, namely Teton County, in the proposal of exceeding $30 million for a new building up there? And that, I'm going to put that against doing highways, doing highway maintenance. I mean, just how is that calculation done? How do you, I just like to know how you justify that. I mean, I get it. We're trying to, get as far as we can, but there's peanut butter is not peanut butter here. I mean, people make those choices. But I'm very concerned about the expenditure of money, at least directly talking to you as WYDOT director. Just what are we doing? I mean, how did we get here? How are we making those choices? How are we not doing road maintenance? How are we using the money so I feel better about any extra money you may get? And just would that end up throwing gasoline on a fire or not on something? And that's my big question. So I guess, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask
Pump the gasoline, we get gas tax off of that, but. Director, please.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, thanks for the question. From a road perspective, we have analysis done every year on the surface quality of all of our roads, so we can tell how our system is behaving, where, from a priority standpoint, where that maintenance has to go. From our vertical standpoint, our vertical construction has been completely put in the back burner. They have not seen a whole lot of major maintenance, not seen a lot of capital improvement over the last 10, 15 years. And a lot of our buildings are in bad shape. And so we've been running a little bit of parallel path, making sure that the State Building Commission is aware. The Joint Appropriations, we were invited to go sit in front of them as well to talk about our building needs with the State Building Department. And so I'm trying to get the facilities back on the same type of inspection process that we had at Parks and how State Building Department's doing. We implemented last year, we got a study done, it's being done now to help us develop a facility improvement plan. So we can help guide our commission and our agency into where facility funds should go towards and when. The 30 million that you talked up in Jackson is the housing project. There would be, I think, 20 new facilities up there, 20 new residences up in Teton County. That's the 30 million. I think we're trying to get it to 25, I think, with the site plan. But doing a facility assessment to ensure we know where all of our critical and deferred maintenance needs are, where our future growth needs from a vertical standpoint, looking at some of the buildings that are probably too far beyond to renovate or remodel, and that they probably have exceeded their lifespan and they just need to be built new. That'll all come out in the facility improvement plan and help us guide out the next 20 years of the facility side of the house. So it's programmed in. Our concern is when the plan comes back, if we don't see more funds, then we're gonna have to shuffle and try to figure out where does the vertical lie in the mission compared to the horizontal side of the infrastructure of our roads. And in the past 20 years, the facilities have fallen way below on the priority list, and probably rightfully so, to ensure that the mission of providing a safe and effective transportation system is successful. The concern is when the facilities are not meeting the needs to protect the equipment that maintain the roads, we're getting into now we're getting chicken and egg. When the snow plows won't start because they have to sit outside because the building that should be keeping them protected isn't large enough to do so, and the call gets, our maintenance employees get called out to go work a road and they can't get the vehicle to start, that becomes a mission issue. And so that's all being put into the facility improvement plan to ensure that the missions of both the vertical and the horizontal can mesh, and how we blend that together to be as successful with our mission as possible. But without the funding, the prioritization is probably going to be our deterrent.
Mr. Co-Chairman, and then I'll come back to you, Senator Kolb.
Well, it's a follow-up based on Senator Kolb's question, so hopefully that works. So this bill right now has severance tax, the severance tax in question going to the highway fund. Could you just go over a brief overview of how is vertical construction funded? Is it from the highway fund? What's the status quo? And also I'm interested in learning about what may be changing based off of your conversations with appropriations in that regard.
Mr. Byrne?
Mr. Chairman, I'll certainly take the first part of that question. And the first part of the question is, how do we fund our vertical construction? And yes, it is out of the highway fund. We don't have specific funds coming from anywhere else that would help with the vertical construction. So it is coming out of the highway fund. As a matter of fact, most expenditures, minus those that are on the legislative side of the house, come out of the highway fund.
And then follow up on the
JAC.
Yep, JAC.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, it was conversation. There was nothing really aligned with it. We did try to get our foot in the door on discussion of major maintenance, discussion on any future large capital construction projects going through the process as well. Nothing, as far as I'm aware, has come out of those discussions other than they're aware of it. The reason we got brought into it was the State Building Department and the Joint Appropriations Committee saw what we were doing or heard what we were doing with our facility improvement plan, looking at a 20-year strategic lookout on how we're going to try to take our vertical into the future and how we're going to ensure that we don't end up at the same place. They heard about that and they asked us to come and speak to that on that regard. And so I think they're directing the State Building Department to do something very similar.
Follow up or?
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Please.
I just want to make sure that I clarify something that I said earlier. So all of our revenue comes into the highway fund. And I made a discrepancy, or I made a division between the legislative programs and the highway funds. Those legislative programs are not funded through normal means like general funds, et cetera. So they are in fact also funded from the highway fund, almost every expenditure, almost with the exception of the CPA and a couple of small hazard elimination type things all come from the highway fund. So all of our expenses across the organization.
When you say CPA.
Yes, the.
You're perking our CPA's ears here, so.
Yeah. That's the capacity purchase agreement that the legislature approved for air service for the state.
Okay. Senator Kolb, did you have anything further?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Yeah, so getting back to this highway funds, I mean, it's my understanding, and just tell me if I'm wrong on this, because I don't sit as your liaison anymore for Transportation Commission. But you have total discrepancy on how you expend those highway funds when it comes to vertical construction. Because I believe in your last meetings, you in fact authorized further development on the project plans to move ahead with that Jackson project. So it is not up in the air. I mean, it's moving forward in the final phases of development. Is that true or not true? I guess I'd like clarification if I could, because maybe I have the wrong information.
I'll also make the discrepancy here, or the distinction, that WYDOT doesn't approve those funds. That's going to be the commission that approves it. But if you guys would please go forward with the understanding of maybe where we're at with the Jackson project and what the impetus behind that would be. I think this committee would probably benefit from understanding why we're building up in the Jackson community, how many total employees were living across over in Idaho. Very similar discussion to what we have here in Cheyenne with the amount of people moving in, driving up and forth to Colorado, those types of things.
Correct. Mr. Chairman, Senator, what the commission approved was to go forward with the level 2 design, so we can at least hone in on what the final cost estimates are going to be, and then we'll have to take that again back to the commission to authorize the expenditure of the funds once the plans are developed to a level and cost estimating is hit to that point. So as for the need of the Jackson housing, we have, I think, currently 25 employees up in that Teton County area that service the pass and everything coming out of the Snake going south. That I'd say we probably have 8 to 10 that have residents or have housing, not state-owned housing, but have their own housing in Teton County that get the benefit of the $2,300 a month, 23, right in that area, that stipend that they get for living in that county. The rest of them live outside the county and commute in to, whether it's highway patrol or maintenance or engineering, all those things that are in the District 3 area up in that county. So the need is significant. I think everybody can attest the cost up there of living is not conducive to a state employee paycheck. But the need to have those services is very great. And to have a maintenance personnel that lives in Idaho when the snowplow trucks are on the east side of the pass, it makes for a little bit difficult mission to try to be successful with.
One last follow-up, and then we're going to move on.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment now, ask if it's wrong or right, that the Transportation Commission has zero oversight by the legislative body, either House or Senate.
Mr. Chairman, I think Dennis can answer this probably better than I do about oversight by the commission. The commission oversees a large portion of our budget, and they oversee how we spend it. They oversee the prioritization of where we're going to spend it, and they authorize when we go under contract.
Mr. Byrne, anything further?
Mr. Chairman, I think the director covered it.
Okay. Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I sat through the appropriations here a few weeks ago, and I saw some questions pointed to you toward the spending of funds on the interchange in Sheridan. There is the project in Casper, which I think started when I was about 12, that is still going. There is a major intersection down here between I-25 and I-80 proposed. Could you just enlighten me a little bit on, I know that most of those are probably federal funds, and yet in light of what the outgoing appropriations said to you, I'm trying to decide, is there an intermingling of your highway funds, the state funds in there? How does that work? If you could just briefly separate that for me.
Sure, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Representative, all of those projects that you mentioned, especially the one that the chairman brought up there, definitely probably 90-10 federal, 10% state. Large portion of our projects are that percentage. If we go after some discretionary grants, so like the I-80, I-25 interchange project down here, to be successful with that large of a grant, we might have to try to sweeten the pot by increasing the stateside match portion of it, just to be more competitive. Really depends on how much we want to gamble, but trying to be successful with getting those discretionary grant funds We might have to be more competitive in that way, but for the most part, I'd say 90-10 from a federal side. Those projects, the other thing I would bring up, and I definitely didn't want to get into a significant debate during that meeting because that wasn't necessarily the topic. Where I would say is that there's the project need, there's a project priority, there's also the NEPA process in which we do every one of our projects, especially if they have any federal dollars, right, which most of them do. We have to go through a public process. The public process comes down with, we want this, we need this, then we go into how does it impact you, how does it impact me? All those things come down to the final design and construction. Are we gonna please everybody with every project? I can almost guarantee you that's not gonna happen. This I-80, I-25 interchange down here, we're gonna impact a lot of people, a lot of businesses that might be on the fringe. I talked to one gentleman last night that we had to go already start working some negotiation on right-of-way, purchasing a corner of his lot because one of the on-ramps is gonna encroach upon it. He was fine with it. Now, some other people may not be fine with it. So it's just a matter of understanding where, if we're going to try to stay 5-10 years out in front of the growth that's necessary, hard decisions are gonna have to be made, but we don't do them in a vacuum. We get out into the public, we talk to them, we have open public meetings, we work through every issue that we can to ensure that we have the best design that's gonna be the most impactful in a positive way and least impactful in a negative way.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Committee, is there any last burning questions? These are questions that we have frankly had 2 years, been almost the exact same discussion for 2 years, been almost the exact same answers for 2 years. So I understand where we're at. Is there any last burning questions? Senator Pappas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question that's related to the vertical construction that we were just discussing. Yeah, I'm also the liaison, one of the liaisons on the State Building Commission. And so all of the vertical construction, or all of the buildings that we do in the state, typically goes through the SBC, right? Whether it be corrections or Department of Health or UW or, State Fair, wherever. What I'm asking you is, what if we decided that all vertical construction should be paid through the SBC or funneled through the SBC and not through YDOT? What would your take be on that? Is that a good or bad thought?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, thank you for the question. And this will probably go back to really answer Senator Kolb's question. Thank you for the time to think through a good answer. One of the main reasons that we wanted to go in front of the Joint Appropriations Committee that last meeting was to not just get our foot in the door on discussions of major maintenance and capital construction, but to ensure some confidence that we have no negative recourse on not going. In our perspective, at least my perspective, I'll take this one on the chin. My executive team can punch me later if I was wrong, but there's no reason for us not to go through that public process on a new construction. There's no reason for us not to go through the State Building Commission and then on to the large project, vertical construction, the CapCon list, not have that on there, regardless of funding stream. So we're perfectly fine. We know it adds a layer, it adds time, but the way we plan in 2 to 20-year increments, we should be able to put that into the schedule. So we're not afraid of going through and justifying and having that extra public comment period through the State Building Commission, and then also when it goes in front of the Joint Appropriations Committee where we have the conversation about the vertical construction. Actually, quite honestly, I welcome it. Just to get out of the fishbowl of, why did you do that? Well, we went through this public process, we went through this public process, we went through this public process. So if it can give us cover on some of the decisions we've made by bringing more people to the table, having the conversation and improving, I see that as a win-win.
Mr. Chairman, just follow up.
Briefly, please.
And I'm actually looking at the funding piece, okay? If we could keep all the funds that you receive, certainly the federal funds, and put them into our roads and bridges, and look at the vertical construction as, you know, most of the SBC budget, I think this year we're at 200 and, well, last meeting, October's meeting, we're 240 million for the supplemental budget. And only about 25 million was other funds. 213 or so were, 200 and some million were out of general fund. Question is would we want to reserve all the funds that we're getting from the federal government, and put it in our roads and highways, and then just use state funds to take care of the buildings?
Do you want to answer that question directly? That's a really loaded question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Mr. Chairman.
It is.
And I think the answer is we have to use our federal funds on the roads and highways. It's what we're using our stateside funds is probably more to the question. Can we use more stateside funds to help maintain and build capacity? Absolutely. If we have to prioritize whether they're going to vertical construction or to horizontal construction, that's where we start running into the problems. So I would welcome any conversation from the Joint Appropriations Committee by inserting us on the CapCon and leaving us in the general fund, where we can take those stateside funds that come from other revenue streams and the federal dollar, keeping them on the roads.
All right, committee, we're going to pull back on questions here. We're going to go into public comment on this particular bill. Is there any public comment on 25 LSO 0258? Please come forward. Introduce yourself. Ms. Little?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Kelly Little. I represent the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. Mr. Chairman, with your blessing, I would like to speak to both of these funding bills.
Sure, we can go ahead and do that. You bet.
Okay. AGC of Wyoming members are the ones who build and maintain our roads, bridges, and highways. And as such, we know better than anyone the condition of our roads throughout Wyoming and the current needs for enhanced maintenance and improvements. Contractors take pride in the quality of their work and how their livelihood has a real-life positive impact on their neighbors, friends, and citizens of Wyoming. AGC of Wyoming supports both 25 LSO 257 and 25 LSO 258. We look at any revenue spent on maintaining and improving Wyoming's road system as an investment in Wyoming's future. That investment is an imperative matter of public safety. Having safe and well-maintained roads is imperative for things like medical transport from rural areas to larger cities for enhanced care, school buses traveling extensive miles to bring children to school and travel to sporting and activity events across the state, and your friends and family arriving home alive and well when traveling during Wyoming's harsh winter months. Traffic crashes in Wyoming imposed a total of $889 million in economic costs in 2023. Those costs include work and household productivity losses, property damage, medical costs, rehabilitation costs, legal and court costs, congestion costs, and emergency services. With Wyoming's motorists traveling 9.32 billion miles per year on Wyoming's road system, it is imperative that the legislature and the state are strategic and diligent about appropriately investing in the highway system. I commend this committee and your ability to think outside the box and bring these creative ways to invest in the system without putting further burden on Wyoming citizens. Both of these draft bills propose rational and logical changes to Wyoming's revenue distribution streams that would allow for enhanced investment in the road system. You all have heard about the impacts that increased material costs and inflation have had on the ability to stretch a dollar. For every dollar that was available to be spent on the road system in 1993, you would need the equivalent of $4.26 today for that same investment. Construction cost inflation, the erosion of motor fuel taxes due to inflation, improved fuel efficiency, and the adoption of hybrid and electric vehicles threaten the state's ability to keep pace with the growing transportation needs. The Federal Highway Administration's National Highway Construction Cost Index, which measures the rate of inflation in labor and material costs, increased 36%. I'll repeat that. It increased 36% between 2022 and 2023 and has increased 59% since the start of 2021. I ask for the committee's consideration to sponsor these bills and make a lasting legacy and investment in one of Wyoming's most important assets, its road system. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for AGC? Yes, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, can we get white chocolate dump trucks?
White chocolate, Mr. Chairman?
That's, yes, the white chocolate dump trucks are, that's an official request from this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I will see about getting a variety of different chocolates. Thanks.
Yeah, just before we get on this bill, and for consideration, I'm telling you. Committee, is there any non-chocolate related discussion and/or questions for AGC? Thank you, Ms. Little, I appreciate it. Any further public testimony? Anything online? I don't think there was anybody registered for this particular bill. All right, with that, we will call this bill back to the dais, close public comment committee. What is your pleasure? Moved by Representative O'Hearn, seconded by, we'll give it to Pendergraft. Representative Berger. Discussion.
So a lot of great points have been brought up for what it could do potentially for our roads, and with this, this is monumental. And there's monumental events that are happening in Evanston right now in Southwest Wyoming. And if you haven't heard, I mean, we've taken away our labor and delivery department in the hospital in Evanston. So no longer can families have children in Evanston. They have to travel, and health and safety of our citizen is paramount. And we haven't brought that up, but that is paramount. And doing this will even help from that perspective as well, because we have people in Kemmer that used to use those services and elsewhere. Now they're going to have to travel to Rock Springs, and keeping our roads and just maintained and plowed, so that those people can travel to have a child. We're going to have to keep that open. There's a lot to think about here. And most importantly is the traveling of our children across this state from events to events. And I think this here is very important to the people of Wyoming, and I think really support this idea. And I thank Representative Obermuller for really his thoughtfulness and what we can do. And I think this is a great start. This is a really good start, moving these funds.
Thank you, Representative Berger. Senator Pappas?
I too am a big supporter of this effort. Thank you. I do believe that this will allow us now to begin to grow again and not just stay in maintenance mode. And it's not just the growth that the director mentioned, but we certainly, those of us who've been on the committee, certainly have understood that between Rock Springs and Green River, they need that secondary road. Because when the interstates are closed down, they can't even have emergency services there. Yeah. And so, but we can't build those things because we're in maintenance mode. So I applaud this effort. Thank you.
Okay, committee, anything further? Senator Kolb, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'll be a no vote on this, and I'd just like to give you a few examples why. First off, capital construction, that's an issue that, may be a topic that could be taken up out of the general fund. I think that's a potential possibility, but we're talking about stripping the general fund of money and then giving that said money without oversight, as has been already testified to, that we have zero control over this when it comes to how this money is expended, and which goes into the capital construction issue also. And then we're facing a budgetary shortfall with K through 12 by 2030. There are other issues that are going to tax our general fund and be issues to balance. And I just find this to be, frankly, at this point in time, short-sighted and not large enough of a topic, basically beyond the scope of this committee to deal with. So I am concerned about public safety, but I think as it concerns elected senator in the state of Wyoming, I got to be concerned about a lot of things. So I just don't believe this is our best vehicle. I understand the need. I think the conversation to kudos to Representative Obermueller for what he's done in his issue, because those are issues. His questions are issues. But is this the way that we can fix this by this Band-Aid? I don't believe so. So I'm not in support. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay. Representative Obermueller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one final comment about it in terms of the relationship between the permanent funds and the highway. As I said earlier, the permanent funds are self-correcting in terms of inflation. The highway fund is not. And so that's the biggest difference. That piece of it, the inflation piece, is huge in this deliberation. One side solves that within itself, the permanent funds. The other side does not, and the more we put this off, the worse it gets. So I would encourage the committee to vote aye and pick this up as a committee bill. Thank you.
No, we're gonna cut public discussion on this, or I'm sorry, committee discussion on this. Committee, I appreciate where everybody has their opinions and their feelings. We're gonna move into a vote on this particular bill. We are cutting this off. We were ahead of schedule. We are now getting behind schedule, so I'd like to keep us going here on a Friday afternoon. So with that being said, Eve, we're gonna go ahead and call to roll call on. Oh, actually, we need to work the bill just to make sure that we don't have any changes. Is there any changes, any amendments to the bill? Seeing nobody raise their hands, okay, pretty cut and dry. Looks like we're ready to go. So Eve, can I get a roll call on 25 LSO 258? Am I on the right one? Yes, 258 on this one.
This is a roll call vote for 25 LSO 0258, Severance Tax Distribution Highway Fund. Senator Brennan.
Aye.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
No.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Representative Berger.
Aye.
Representative Nemec.
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Obermueller.
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft.
Aye.
Representative Smith.
Aye.
Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Representative Wiley.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Boner.
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
13 aye, 1 no.
All right. Thanks, committee, on that one. We are going to roll right into 257, the vehicle sales tax distribution on the highway fund. We are going to, I'm going to try to keep us on stretch here. I think everybody understands what the bill does. I'm going to have Talise run over the bill for us. And then we will have YDOT briefly discuss their impact on it. And then I will also bring in the Department of Revenue on this briefly. But I also know we have quite a bit of public testimony on this particular bill. So before we roll into this, I'd also like to recognize our Mayor Cheyenne sitting in the back of the room, Mr. Collins. Thank you for joining us. So with that being said, Talise, the floor is yours on 257, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, Staff Attorney LSO, presenting Bill Draft 25 LSO 257, version 0.5, Vehicle Sales and Use Tax Distribution Highway Fund. This bill draft was requested at the committee's September meeting. So I'll start by going through the bill draft. Section 1 begins on page 1, lines 8 through 10, by amending the sales tax distribution statute and the use tax distribution statute. Page 2, lines 1 through 14, amends the sales tax distribution statute by adding a new subsection R. This subsection provides that the Department of Revenue shall distribute all revenue collected and remitted to the department under the motor vehicle sales tax statutes for the state's portion of the motor vehicle sales tax and transfers that motor vehicle sales tax to the highway fund. Page 2, lines 16 through 22, and page 3, lines 1 through 9, amend the use tax distribution statute by adding a new subsection P. This subsection provides that the Department of Revenue shall distribute all revenue collected and remitted to the department under the motor vehicle use tax statutes for the state's portion of the motor vehicle use tax and transfer that motor vehicle's use tax to the highway fund. Section 2 on page 3, lines 11 through 14 provides that this act shall apply to motor vehicle and trailer purchases made on and after July 1st, 2025, and shall apply to sales and use taxes on sales of motor vehicles and trailers paid on and after July 1st, 2025. Section 3 on page 3, line 16 provides an effective date of July 1st, 2025, and I'll stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions for Ms. Hanson on this bill? Thank you, Ms. Hanson, appreciate that. We'll go ahead and call up both state agencies here. We've got 4 chairs and I see 4 people, so if we can have YDOT as well as the Department of Revenue join us, save us a little bit of time in playing musical chairs. Director Westby, we'll have you go ahead and start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to get into the same spiel as the last one.
We won't be doing that, I can assure you
Yes,
of
sir.
that, so.
But I appreciate the effort of LSO and our partners working at the Department of Revenue. This is seemed relatively pretty simple, but then as we started getting with the Department of Revenue, it came a little bit more complex, and so I think there'll be some discussions about some potential amendments to clean it up a little bit. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, where this goes is the sales and use tax on vehicles, instead of it going to the general fund, would go to YDOT for the highway fund, and all the reasons why we discussed it in the last bill as well. Kind of the argument, not argument, I guess our position on it is if you're gonna buy a vehicle, you're probably gonna use it on a road. Therefore, some of those taxes should come to help maintain and work the roads. So, and with that, do we have anything else?
Oh, Taylor, come on. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry, Darren Westby, Department of Transportation.
You're good. All right, Mr. Fanning, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brett Fanning, I'm the Excise Tax Administrator at the Department of Revenue. And just a couple items with this potential bill draft is, so we are the administrative agency for sales tax in the state of Wyoming. And so the county treasurers, when you go and buy a motor vehicle, they collect that sales tax on behalf of the state and the local entities, and then they actually send in that money to us here at the Department of Revenue. And they have their own separate return. And we are actually able to track the vast majority or all of that sales tax that comes into us on motor vehicles. And so when I say motor vehicles, this is the standard cars, trucks that you are thinking of when you go to your county treasurer and pay that sales tax. Now, one of the items that we noted is potentially in this bill draft is it outlines the sales tax that's paid on mopeds, motorcycles, and off-road recreational vehicles. Those returns come into us on a separate return, our normal vendor return. It's an important distinction here. So we've got the ability to track the sales tax on cars and trucks, but the sales tax on these other items that are included in this potential bill draft, or this bill draft, a little bit more delicate for us to determine how those sales tax dollars are coming into us. Those vendors, they actually submit tax on motorcycles, mopeds, off-road vehicles, but they also have other sales. When they report to us, that's all one specific return. So without a doubt, administratively, we can do this at the county treasurer for those returns that come into us. So, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the items I just wanted to discuss. It's one of the items in this bill. The other part is kind of the distribution piece of this. It's so on page 3, section 2. So we can have this effective July 1 as far as the county treasurers, and this is an internal portion for us. But if we're gonna try and separate out just the state's only portion, that's the distribution piece that's gonna require some programming on our side. And so when a county treasurer, so we're here in Laramie County, I go and buy a new vehicle, 6% sales tax. This bill is just looking at 70% of the statewide 4%. That's what the statewide portion of LSO is just kind of discussed. It does leave, the way we read the bill draft, the county and our local partners whole. So it's just the 70% of the 4%. The rest of the pennies are gonna stay per this bill draft. That requires some programming for us on the backside. And so I believe there is maybe some potential language we can discuss for programming. I know that we've just heard from the director that roads is a problem. So we believe that maybe there's some conversation there on how we can get both of those and still have the Department of Revenue do its programming. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Representative O'Hearn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you guys have some figures on, you mentioned there was two different ways the funds come in, trucks and cars, and then mopeds and OTVs and all those other little things that's going to be harder for you to take out. Do you have a number for what that number is and what the number total going to the highway department will be? Thank you.
Mr. Fanning?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, I have the statewide 70% that would go to the highway fund per this. And if you would like, that number is 67 million last fiscal year. So that is the 70% of the statewide 4%. The other 30% of the 4%, sorry, distribution does get a little complicated, it goes to our local partners. And then you have your additional pennies that go to the local partners. So 67 million is the round figure. I have the exact number from last fiscal year. For the motorcycles, mopeds, and those additional items, Mr. Representative, sorry, I do not. Kind of just based on what I said. Those returns come in differently to us. Could I venture to get there? Maybe, but it would just be an educated guess.
Okay. Representative Berger, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and it helped me clarify, and I know we're collecting, so we're trying to collect the tax on, or the taxes on the sale of these vehicles and stuff. Do we collect any taxes that go directly to our highway department from the sale of like tires and car parts or an oil change? You know how the ammo and guns, a portion of that goes to, those sales go to the game and fish, but do any of the sales that related to road things like tires again and all that, does that go? Have we ever thought about adding that?
Okay.
Or does it go? I mean, there's several questions.
We got the question.
Okay.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, thanks for the question. That was one of the bills that we kind of ran down through the interim. I think it was tire taxes, I think, how it came across as initially titled. It was chosen not to go down that path at this time in lieu of this.
Okay. Director Fanning?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, there is one small piece, and I believe we did talk about this at another interim meeting. There is, if you sell various types of gases, propane, butane, any of those items, we actually survey these companies. They tell us how much sales tax they submitted on those items, and then there is 10% of that actually goes to the highway fund. And I don't have the figure in front of me, my apologies, Mr. Representative, but I believe it was several $100,000. And so this discussion is certainly in the millions.
Representative Pendergraft, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, you and I had some discussions over this last year about some issues with ATVs, and you had mentioned cars and trucks. And I just, for my own edification, if I am a rancher and I go buy a pickup and it's never going to be taken off the ranch, can you explain how, is that tax included with the cars and trucks still? Or does that then switch over to more like an ATV? Can you just help me a little bit?
Mr. Fanning?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Representative, certainly recall a variety of our discussions. And to your point, yes, it does get complicated when there are vehicles that are used just off the road. Maybe they're I assume that they're still titled in some capacity. But what further confuses the situation is there is an agricultural exemption available for entities who are just using these items off-road, and it's for agricultural purposes, and that's well documented. So I would prefer, my apologies, to punt on that answer. But to your point is, yes, there is some distinction if there is a vehicle used off-road and then there's other sales tax exemptions available.
And I'm going to follow up on that. That was one of the discussions that I think I had had with a couple of people around town when they heard this was, I'm going to buy a combine, that's a motor vehicle. I'm not going to be taxed on this because it's ag. And so I just want to make sure that that's publicly stated, that we're talking about vehicles that are going to be on the roads, that are using the roads. That is the intent behind this. And that's why we have this laid out with the particular Romanettes that you guys have on here. Can you verify with me the Romanettes and the proposed amendment? I don't know if that was coming from WYDOT or if that was coming from you, but I just would like to make sure that we're not bringing in anything that was not intended.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll tag team this.
Perfect. Yep, I figured as much.
If that's certainly okay. So if we're looking at the bill draft on page 2, and then we've got the lines 9 through 14, on line 11, so it's 10 and 11, 3915-107B Romanet 1. So that's your general standard motor vehicles, cars and trucks, and just for simplified purposes. Cars and trucks, you're gonna go down to your county treasurer and you're gonna pay the tax there, unless there's an exemption. Romanet 2 is the very same principle. So you've been gifted some type of motor vehicle, you've got to pay sales tax on it at fair market value. That is in conjunction with the county treasurer returns that the Department of Revenue can accurately track, no question. Then Romanet 8. This is where we get into imposition statutes and payment for mopeds, motorcycles, and then off-road recreational vehicles. This is the discussion I was having before, where it's a little more convoluted for the department to break out what is exactly going on the road. These dealers, they're also gonna sell items that likely don't go on the road. And so that Romanet 8 is something the Department of Revenue would encourage this committee to at least view, because it's harder for us to separate those out. Romanets 1 and 2 in 3915-107, we can accurately get that to you. Then on page 3, lines 3 through 9, it's the exact same principle there. So on line 5, carrying on the line 6, in our use tax statutes, B Romanet 2, that is the same thing. It's use tax due on a motor vehicle. Likely, it's a motor vehicle that's been purchased from outside Wyoming, bringing it into Wyoming for storage, use, or consumption. Corresponding use taxes due there. And then Romanet 3, which I understand it says 2 through 4 here. Romanet 3 is the same principle. You've been given a motor vehicle, you need to pay use tax on it at the fair market value price. And then Romanet 4 is that same corresponding statute related to our dealers, our vendors collecting sales tax on mopeds, motorcycles, and then off-road vehicles. There is a distinction here, and it is important. So when you purchase the motor vehicle, the tax is due in the place of your county principal residence and effective July 1 based upon your driver's license. When these dealers are selling these other type of, and I understand it includes motorcycles, they collect tax based on where possession is taken. So there is this distinction here, and it's per some conversations that we've had, but important for the Department of Revenue to clarify that.
Okay. Mr. Rossetti?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Taylor Rossetti, Deputy Director of WYDOT. And as Mr. Fanning said, I mean, when we got the bill, we sat down with them and tried to work through this. And I do think one of the important distinctions, to Representative Pendergraft's question, this isn't really changing any of the places where you would be exempt or otherwise be exempted from paying a tax now on these types of motor vehicles. It's really simply just basically changing where those distributions for these specific sales tax would go. Instead of going to the general fund, they would come to the highway fund. I think the amendment that we did have passed out to you was worked together with us in the Department of Revenue. And it was really to address that issue, to pull those mopeds, motorcycles, and ORVs out of this because of the problem that it creates for the Department of Revenue and the vendors. It would really change the way the vendors would have to do their returns on sales within their business. It didn't seem like maybe at the time the juice was maybe worth the squeeze on that side. Not that there's not significant sales, but just because it would be a significant list and impacting a lot of other people. As Mr. Fanning mentioned, the rest of those revenues in that $67 million figure is stuff that is readily identifiable that's currently collected at the county treasurer's office and really only impacts the way that the Department of Revenue would distribute those funds, which is why we have that proposed amendment in front of you. The other thing that Mr. Fanning mentioned was the issue with the programming within their system and how they distribute. That's also contained in that amendment. And to briefly go over what would be in there is that first year, to allow them time to program it, they would basically report what those sales would be to the general fund and just have a direct transfer to the highway fund. And then going forward, once the programming is in place, it would just be automatically distributed to the highway fund.
Okay. Representative Pendergrift, please.
Thank you. Just quick question, if I could. One of the things we uncovered this last summer was the idea that some dealers, as you mentioned, Mr. Fanning, the tax is paid on where the vehicle is picked up, if an ATV or whatever they might be. And so some dealers, it is rumored, have been saying, hey, I can save you some money if I just deliver in this county, or if you take delivery over here, then over here. For either you or Taylor, if we exclude ORVs, ATVs, all those sorts of things, do we then take away some of the incentive for tax evasion, I guess is my question.
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraph, excellent question. This potential bill is just on the distribution of those funds. So it's really, this bill draft is focused on how can we get the sales tax dollars over to WYDOT. Your question related to the sourcing and how's that go is really a different question. And this bill draft currently would not address any sort of tax evasion questions.
Okay. Senator Cole, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a, I guess, clarification on the total net gain to YDOT. What does this mean in real dollars? You know, not 4% of 70. I mean, what in dollars are we actually talking about? An estimate. And then also maybe a net negative impact to the counties, if there is any, for loss of revenue. If you could address that.
I'll just go ahead and take that. The discussion was already asked, but 65-ish, right?
67.
67 million. And then the way that this bill has been structured is we're only talking about the state portion. There is nothing done to the county portion or the local portion. So that's where the 70% of the 4% discussion that Mr. Fanning was talking about earlier comes into play. Senator Cole?
Annually or biannually?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, annual. This is an annual figure.
Perfect. Okay. Committee, any further questions? Okay. Anything further from either one of you or either department, we'll say. I look at you two as the same now. So you guys are just kind of joined at the hip. So, okay. Thank you very much to the departments. Appreciate you guys coming forward. We're going to go ahead and move this into public comment. Is there any public comment on 25 LSO 257? Oh, now, this is not fair. I thought we had discussion on this, but that's okay. That means we might get this done before lunch. Anybody online for this one? Okay, seeing none. We will pull this bill back to the dais here. Committee, what is your pleasure on 257? Moved by Representative O'Hearn, seconded by Stivar? Okay. Seconded by Stivar. Committee, any discussion on this bill before we work it? Okay, let's work the bill real quick. We do have two proposed amendments. Is there any discussion on those proposed two amendments brought forward by YDOT and the Department of Revenue on this? Anybody want to move those? Okay, we'll move to O'Hearn, second to Pappas. Let's go ahead and take them one at a time as they were moved in here. So proposed amendment 1, and Talise, this is good enough for you. You've got this information, okay? So page 2, lines 11 through 14, strike I, insert and after 2, strike and 8. And then 9 through 14, we have some new language. If there's anybody in the public that is interested in this amendment, we do have extra copies, and I think we can also make sure that these are shown to the public as well, so we'll get those out there. Any discussion on the First Amendment? And then also, I'm sorry, on page 3, line 6, we've got after 2 and insert 3, strike through 4, and there's some new language for lines 4 through 9. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor of proposed amendment 1 to 257, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Proposed amendment 2 is on page 3, line 14, adding to lines 14 through 16, for fiscal year 2026, a like amount shall be transferred directly to the highway fund from the general fund, and then beginning July 1, 2026, shall distribute revenue directly to the highway fund as prescribed in section 1. This is that computing necessary, working through the coding and all that kind of stuff for the department to make sure we get this done correctly. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Okay. Committee, anything further on this particular bill as we are ready to vote? Question? Oh. Yeah, we just did that. Yep. Okay. Question being called. Eve, can you please call roll on 25 LSO 257 as amended for committee sponsorship?
This is a roll call vote on 25 LSO 0257, Vehicle Sales Tax Distribution Highway Fund as amended. Senator Brennan.
Aye.
Senator Furphy. Aye. Senator Cole.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Representative Berger.
Aye.
Representative Nemec.
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Obermueller.
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft.
Aye.
Representative Smith.
Aye.
Representative Stivar.
Aye.
Representative Wiley. Aye. Co-Chairman Boner.
Aye.
Chairman Brown.
Aye.
14 aye.
Shocking. We actually had a unanimous vote in this committee. I don't know that that's ever happened, or at least in my, yeah, no, you're not changing your vote, Stivar.
Let's go.
All right, committee, that does bring us to our lunch hour. I'm looking at our agenda really briefly just to make sure that we've got this in here. We're on schedule. Schedule shows us for only 1 hour. I think that's fair. We've got a couple places that are close, and that's just in an effort to try to keep us going on schedule today. So we will break, and we will be back here at 1 o'clock to start the YDOT efficiency study discussion. So we are in recess till 1.